the activities that you do are too progressed compared to
Really?
the way RuneScape used to be. Yeah.
It's funny that I like needed to get this recorded. I'm like, I want you on record insulting RuneScape. No,
Insulting RuneScape 3, mostly combat though,
okay.
is
Yeah.
what people will give the most criticism towards.
So what do they say exactly? That you're too good at like you're unrealistically good, or
It isn't true to form.
yeah,
Is what, and most people are playing that game, I think, due to its nostalgia value. At least that's why
yeah.
they start. They come for the nostalgia. They stay for the dopamine addiction, I
Oh my
think is how
God,
I say it.
that's very true.
Yeah. I got to click on stuff because it gives me points.
Yes,
Very
literally.
addictive.
It's so addictive. Like I was doing a bunch of mining yesterday, and I got finally to like the level where I could mine. I got like to 60 or something. It's like, oh, now I have a red pickaxe instead of a blue one.
Yeah, it is when you express it in its most reductionist terms or simplify it. It's like, wait, what
Yeah.
am I doing? You're just trying to get pixels rearranged in a more favorable order.
Yeah, but you could like, I mean, it's very, very true
Do that
about
about anything.
RuneScape. But you could say that about like painting or everything, like music.
But not about some things like love.
Yeah, yeah, probably like love is like the only thing, honestly.
Although in that case, you're just kind of that's still just kind of orienting a chemical reaction in your brain
Yeah,
the right way.
there are people who probably think about it that way. I remember when I took philosophy classes, I had one professor who told us about these philosophers, like just modern like academics who were philosophers, and they were husband and wife, and they apparently like because of some like epistemological like philosophical argument decided to raise their kids and live their life just talking about like what's empirically verifiably true like this, like instead of like I love you, they'd be like, oh, I'm like feeling a lot of like oxytocin right now. They're probably less stupid examples, but according to my professor, after a while they realized like we can't teach our kids like this. This is like not ethical. Like I think because it was to some ridiculous degree that they were like breaking everything down into what's empirically verifiable.
I'll do that from time to time, not quite to that extent,
Yeah,
but I'll
yeah,
make a comment to my girlfriend like in jest and
yeah.
be really reductionist about it.
I think there's something to it. I think there's something actually helpful about it, and it's probably just like where you use it. Because I'm sure I do that too. Whenever I analyze something, I'm essentially like reducing certain aspects of it or something. But the audio sounds good. You sound good. I sound good.
I am gonna get a mic for our next conversation.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, you sound good. As long as the echo wasn't happening, which only happened for a bit of the last one, and I don't know why. You really
Still could
sound.
be clearer, I
Yeah. Yeah.
think. Anyway,
Yeah. No, it'll be good. Yeah. Yeah.
I just have to figure out where to mount it.
Where to do what?
Where to mount it so that it's coming at me from
Oh yeah.
the right angle. I don't have a lot of space on my desk.
Oh,
So,
okay.
there were three
Yeah.
topics that we were going to talk about, or that I
Yeah.
proposed to you. We don't have to.
Sure.
I think they were policing, gun control, and social programs,
I'm
but
down.
all of which are potentially gigantic conversations, which is why I
Yeah.
want to start with an even bigger one. Is the universe deterministic?
Oh, that should be easy. I don't know. What do you think?
No, 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 no. Don't pull the old question to a
Is the
question.
universe so what does that even mean? So like is every single thing predestined to happen before it happens?
Yeah, like you take a look at if you took like a really complex freeze frame of all of the atoms in a room, so to speak. You could predict what would happen next down to how I would react based on how different stimuli were going to make my brain feel.
Hmm.
So determinism, I believe, is at odds with free will, I think.
Right. I mean, people write so much about this and like talk so much about. I can't pretend I like know all the sort of arguments or anything. It like, I mean, I don't think all human behavior is like deterministic. So I guess I don't think the universe is deterministic. I
Of
mean,
course you do. But you're a
yeah.
human. Your experience is certainly not reality.
Right, and that's the whole thing. So like how could I give you any answer other than like, well, I feel like I have free will. Like how could I get out of my human mind and say like, no, actually like this
Relate it to what we were just talking about. Try to explain your actions in the most reductionist way possible. What are you doing? I mean, right now we're talking, recording a podcast, whatever. What are you
yeah,
really doing?
drinking coffee. No. Uh yeah, I mean like what do you mean? I don't know. What do you mean? Like
So, what you're about to say next is a
yeah.
function of you believe it's right now free will. You get to say whatever you want, you can take it in any direction. Someone who
Yeah.
believes in determinism would say, well, while you think that's the case, everything you've ever read, every person you've ever talked to are all culminating to this one moment. And a sufficiently complex model would be able to say exactly what you're going to say next.
So if I'm thinking, well, I could scream at any point, someone with a deterministic framework would say, but like whether or not you're going to is already predetermined.
It
Oh.
is sufficiently predictable, I guess you could say. So, yeah, predetermined, but predetermined is a funky way to say it.
Yeah, it's
But yeah,
almost like
but yes, it's like if you put so the universe before we had people pooping and shooting each other and climbing trees. The universe was just hydrogen, right? It was only hydrogen,
yeah,
and then that condensed, turned to stars, etc. So like you could model this conversation from a huge universe full with hydrogen
yeah.
based on the initial conditions.
Don't you think the burden of proof is on people like arguing that like the universe is deterministic?
I'm not sure that that's true. I don't. Is there evidence for either?
Like if I have but that's like a huge claim. So it's like, okay, the universe is determined. I guess I'm making a big claim by saying it's not deterministic. But uh how would we know if it was deterministic? Like I don't, how would we get evidence about this?
I don't know. You're the guy who studied philosophy, right? Shouldn't you
And
be
I
able to help
know
me out
no, I know even less. The more you study, the less you know. It's a racket. That's how they get you.
here? That's why all the people are going for PhDs.
Exactly. They're like, I need to know less. This is too much. But no, it's an extremely good question. I mean, it came up in a session with a client the other day, and we were talking about all this other stuff, and determinism is part of the conversation. And my client brought it up, but I didn't even address it because there was so much other stuff to address, and I thought, I don't know about that, and does it even really have to do like is it ever important like whether or not things are deterministic? Like
Oh, only I think sitting next to a friend in front of a fire with whiskey. Other than that, I'm not sure that it's a meaningful thing to think about yet
yeah.
in this stage of human evolution.
Hmm.
Maybe in
Yeah.
the future it might become useful.
Yeah. What do you think? So
But
it seems like you maybe lean towards like there's something to it or cuz
yeah,
I don't know.
it hurts my head to
Yeah.
think about, but that isn't a good reason for me. That's not a rejection of that hypothesis. Just
Yeah.
because it hurts my brain to think about the concept of infinity, hurts my brain to try to visualize or think about. That doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
not a real concept.
Right.
It might be, it might not be, but just because my feeble human brain can't comprehend it doesn't mean it's not real.
Totally.
So determinism seems like it makes the most sense to me out of anything that's out there. And
Yeah.
I know that human beings have a complex where we elevate our perception of the world to
Yeah.
be grand. The invention of religion, superiority to other animals, other
Yeah.
forms of life, when in reality we're still just the same cells replicating, analogous to a tree outside.
Sure.
So if we are willing to elevate our own sense of self to that level, why wouldn't we do something like that for free will?
I think that's totally valid. I just think like yeah, our brains not understanding something isn't evidence that that thing doesn't exist, but it's definitely not evidence that the thing does exist too.
Yeah,
You know, and like no, but I agree. We do have the tendency to make ourselves out to be super special and spiritualize our experience and
for
stuff.
sure.
Um, I so if that was true, if determinism is true, like then like the time and day that I'm gonna die is like is like already
Is
set,
known.
essentially. Yeah,
Is
yeah,
known. It's because let's say you're going to get hit by a car or whatever, like all of the other things that need to happen will happen. The An alternative hypothesis would be things are probabilistic, and this gets into
mm,
quantum mechanics really quickly because at a very small level, things don't happen predictably.
yeah.
As in, there's a chance, there's a sense of randomness, or maybe the only form of true randomness that actually exists at the quantum level is the argument.
Is the counter argument to determinism you're saying, or a possible
I
one?
think, yeah, it certainly is at odds with it. I don't
Okay,
know if
that's
it's
what
the
I was
direct
thinking too.
counter. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too. That like chance is like
Hmm.
the counter argument. Um, Not necessarily even just like free will because we're like such independent, free thinking creatures, but just like there's too many factors. And
Hmm.
so, like, how would, if it was predicted, who's predicting it and how are they taking in all the factors into account?
Let's use. I want to use two examples: the
Yeah.
weather and getting a drop in RuneScape 3. Okay. So the
Sure.
weather is just a bunch of different particles bouncing into each other with temperature and pressure.
Yeah.
It's more or less what it is. If you had a really, really, really smart computer model, hypothetically, you should be able to predict how all of those individual particles are going to interact, down to each atom.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case. That's at the, yeah, I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. Good luck doing it. Clearly,
Yeah.
we aren't doing that yet, but just because we aren't sophisticated enough to do it doesn't mean it's not potentially possible.
Yeah.
So that would be a deterministic argument.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that or no?
No, no, please keep going. Yeah.
So for RuneScape,
Yeah.
part of the rush of playing it is I have a 1 in 5,000 chance at getting this very fabled drop every time I kill this monster. So I'm going to do it over and over again on the off chance that I get that drop. Is that something that's predetermined whether or not you get the drop or not?
Well, I would have to know how RuneScape works. You know what I mean? And it's the same, but it goes back to the weather thing because you're saying like there's probably not an unlimited number of factors that need to be assessed. And if we had the right like technology, we could assess like the weather years in advance or something like that, like hypothetically or something like
Yep.
that. But it's because we would have a certain set of technology to assess like theoretically a limited number of factors, I would say. And I would think it's the same with RuneScape. I just don't know what those factors are, like how the tech works. But I would think with life in general, there's too many factors. Like with what I'm gonna say next. And you could say, well, of course it seems like that now and it could change in the future, and that could be entirely right. But it feels intuitively true that there are way too many factors. How could someone ever predict? Yeah, I guess it's just that doesn't feel true, but it really, yeah, it seems like there's way too many, there's just infinite. Yeah, I guess it's just there's infinite factors. So if it's limited in some way, maybe you can develop the technology to predict. But in general, yeah, that's why I feel like maybe determinism questions should like apply or could be talked about in more specific cases more productively, maybe. Because in general, yeah, I don't know.
I want to fight back against infinite. If you think about just the things that exist on Earth, just to name an example, there's a
Yeah,
finite amount of electrons contained within Earth. There's a finite amount of molecules. It's a You can approximate the figure, but there's a number of molecules. If each of those molecules can has an interaction with another molecule, that's still a fixed number, a huge number, but fixed,
yeah.
not infinite.
But isn't there an infinite set of combinations of the molecules and combinations of those
Mm-mm.
combinations? And like, if you're trying to
No.
predict what I'm gonna say, like next, like it could come from all my past experiences that I guess you could say are limited in time and stuff, but like there's no limitations to like what those experiences were. Well, I guess there are, but
Sure there are. How many words do you even know? I
like
mean,
or the sound I could make. But
how many
yeah,
different
so
sounds can you
but
make?
that's why I say the determinism question makes more sense the more specific you get. Like when you're asking, what am I going to say next? Like that's why it's like, yeah, there are some factors like you're saying right now that you could consider. But as
Yep.
far as like, yeah, yeah,
I think it's useful to perform the thought experiment at the level at which you can understand it at the smaller level, and then
yeah.
extrapolate that to still be true even for a much more complex system.
Hmm.
The only reason why you balk at the idea of that being true at a larger level is because we're kind of stupid.
Yeah. I just think like the like free will, I would assume it's like a spectrum. It's not like you don't have free will or you do have free will. I would just assume like every action is like a certain degree of free based on
Hmm.
like how you process information and like rule out limitations sort of on you. And like it's sort of like we're always going to be acting to some end, which which in a sense is like a limitation, but we're still more free because we're taking away other limitations. I don't know. This is super abstract.
Do you think, what if you think about something simple like a plant that's
Yeah,
trying to grow and produce chlorophyll?
that one.
Yeah, that guy right over there, take him for example. Does
Dying.
he have free will?
Um, yeah, I was actually just thinking about this. I would say probably like, with plants, it's like not how we talk about will, but like on some level, if I was talking to a plant expert, they would probably be able to explain to me how like something plants do is similar to a decision. You know, I imagine there's something that's like you could say, oh, it's almost like they're choosing which they do. And so maybe they could make some argument. I don't know. I would say no. But I would say some animals, it makes sense. Animals, it would make sense to say maybe they do. I certainly don't think it makes sense to say no animals are. Well, I guess I'm talking about consciousness and free will sort of
Yes,
in
you
one.
are.
Yeah, I'm talking about them in one. Is that a mistake, do you think? Or because they're sort of.
Yes, and I think that the consciousness argument, it's a separate but related problem.
Yeah,
It's difficult not to conflate the two, but
yeah,
we tend to anthropomorphize all this stuff. You're like,
yeah,
even with the plant example, you were judging it on a scale from like single-celled organism to human,
yeah.
and that lens is already kind of wrong.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
It's just the way that we're going to use ourselves as a reference frame, which
yeah,
isn't necessarily a reliable way to interpret the universe.
yeah. The deterministic thing seems old fashioned to me. I know that's just like a feeling, but it seems like the old fashioned way of viewing. Like, I think it was. Like, you know, Aristotle or all these other people. It's like everything's like in motion and like determined, and like the bodies are like I don't know. I'm just like vaguely quoting what I feel like a lot of people thought. But I don't know. It just feels like and then I don't know. I feel like they're one in the same belief. It's like the world outside is deterministic, but humans have free will. And I almost like reject that whole thing and say like, well, it's all more complicated and there's free will probably outside of humans. I don't know. Don't you think that's true that like the idea of they kind of go hand in hand and like I guess I should say for that like I sort of challenge like not the notion of free will, but the emphasis people put on willpower and like your ability to basically overcome your context. I obviously think we have the ability to do that. I just, in a lot of situations, think that people put too much emphasis on willpower and make it out to be something that can like save the day all the time or something like that. And I almost feel like that goes in line with people thinking like non-human animals and stuff are deterministic and stuff. Like, well, we have this amazing willpower that they don't have, and it's like, well, we do have willpower, but it has its own limitations and so on. But as far as total determinism and stuff, that's hard. I don't know.
I think I've exhausted the amount that I can talk about this without becoming a dum dum. Uh,
Yeah, me too.
I'm I'm not qualified to talk about this.
Yeah, me neither. I only have a bachelor's. Can I get more coffee? I should have warned you that I would need to take a break here and there. Can
No.
I mean,
No. You can't.
the fact that you were gonna say no was determined. Predetermined. Okay, sorry, 1 second. Okay. I brought back some cartridges to reload if I run out of coffee.
Amazing. I had mine in a mason jar as well.
Oh,
I
nice.
was cold brewing it. I actually just started drinking coffee yesterday morning. I took a little break.
Really?
Yeah.
You're like, oh crap! If I'm gonna debate, I gotta get back on that coffee.
I didn't sleep enough last night.
Oh,
Just
really?
went to bed. Just went to bed too late.
Yeah. No, but I'm glad we talked about that. I mean, honestly, I feel like you talk enough about anything and it connects to everything else. Like, I feel like even talking about that, it's like that does connect to probably a lot of political stuff and social stuff, like how you view free will and determinism.
We're all connected, huh? What's
Yeah.
that plant back there made of?
Green.
Do you mean life or do you mean all things?
When I say we're all connected and stuff, no, just like a subject. Like we talk about one subject, and it like eventually connects to like other subjects. Like, yeah, it's like all that stuff about willpower. Like, I like that connects to me for how I view a lot of social issues. I feel like honestly, I feel like a huge difference between more left leaning people and right leaning people is like a view of willpower a lot of times, or it certainly comes up in that way, but. Yeah. Or like a view of, what the individual should be expected to be capable of within context or something like that. Anyways, yeah. What? Yeah. So we solved determinism. We solved free will.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the dealer's choice.
Okay.
Policing, Second Amendment, or social programs. Take your pick.
Let's start with social programs, I guess.
Okay, let's do it. Which one do you want to talk about?
I don't know. What were you thinking? I'm totally down to go with if you were thinking about anything in particular.
So I think when I say social programs, my mind immediately goes to welfare and Medicaid because those are the two largest ones.
Okay.
And they're part of our mandatory spending instead of our discretionary. So we're going to keep paying them every year.
Yeah.
And I think that they are one of the most important factors that perpetuate the class divide and stratification of wealth in the United States.
How is that? How do they do that? Medicaid and what was the other one? Did you say?
Welfare.
Medicare? Oh, okay, Medicare and Medicaid and welfare.
I guess Medicare, Medicaid, and welfare.
Sure, yeah.
Perverse incentives is probably the way I'd try to summarize it. If someone paid me $10,000 a month to exist, I would just stay at home.
Yeah, but
I would not pursue anything meaningful. The best work that someone does is forged out of pressure and some amount of conflict.
Yeah.
Well, I think that by giving a fixed amount of money disincentivizes that. Now, I recognize that there are certain people that are in a specific financial place where they don't have the financial agency to kickstart themselves into a positive reinforcement cycle.
Yeah.
And I realize that our system doesn't do those people any favors. The poor tax is what you'd call it. It's not a real tax, but fixed fines and fees to do things disproportionately hurt people who are poor.
Yeah.
AKA they're regressive.
Right.
So I realize that some people just need a little kickstart to get back on their feet. And once they do that, they can self-sustain. The problem with things like welfare are you can lose your benefits by starting to work.
Yeah.
So if I'm earning $8 an hour to collect welfare checks and I start earning $7.50 an hour by going to work, why the hell would I? Or
Right.
even at $9 an hour, I'm not going to go to work for $1 an hour
Right.
comparatively. So the on off, the binary nature of welfare is problematic. A sliding scale, if anything, seems like a much more appropriate public policy. So
I totally
um,
agree.
my argument is not necessarily against having some sort of social program to help people who have fallen on especially hard times. It's
Sure.
that the way that we currently implement it is perversely incentivized and ultimately harmful.
Okay. And you think that is like the main reason for like a worsening class divide in the US or in
I think it's one of the main reasons. Yeah, I do.
okay. I feel like I've seen studies about the incentive thing not being true. That like people being on social welfare programs actually does not disincentivize them. Did someone just follow us? Someone just followed us. Someone's watching. But yeah, I think I've seen something. Yeah, I could try to pull it up. But have you seen like evidence that the? Because I know it feels intuitively true, the incentive thing. But have you seen? Thanks, John's Locke, for following.
Philosophy reference for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the incentive thing. I know that feels intuitively true, but like, have you seen evidence of that? That people like on social welfare programs are like actually disincentivized to work.
Um, is it not fair enough to say that it follows some pretty basic logic? I
It's
don't think
I
I'm making any sort of big jump to say that.
no, I do think it's a big jump. I think it's a claim about human behavior that needs to be supported empirically, and I do think I've seen counter evidence to it.
So what are you saying then? You think that telling people that if they start working they'll actually get less money
Um,
is
that's
not
so.
going to disincentivize them to stay on social programs?
Sorry, I was trying to look up a source, but it's hard to do. Um, I basically I don't necessarily agree with I don't agree with at all how the U.S. government like does social welfare and stuff. But like, yeah, I don't think people should be disincentivized to work. But I don't necessarily think like giving people. I don't want like a check from the government to be the way people like support themselves. I don't think that like it you can just say, oh, it naturally follows because if I was getting, a check from the government, I wouldn't want to work and so on because it's not that simple in a lot of situations. Like I and also none of that has to do with Medicaid or Medicare or health insurance or anything. But like,
No, it
as far
doesn't.
as like temporary assistance for needy families or something or like programs like that, like it's not I don't think it's actually the case that people get like enough money to not work in most situations. I think they just get like for example food stamps I think is one of the more common programs people get. So like food stamps to me seems pretty clear like probably not disincentivizing people to work. Especially the people I've known on food stamps, like they got like what $80 a week, $70 a week.
I agree with you.
Yeah, but
No contention.
yeah, I mean, as far as like what programs are giving people enough money that they're like choosing those programs besides working like when they could work.
Okay, so for food stamps, I just want to say, are you okay with like restricting the types of food someone can buy? Is it fair to say like meat, cheese, milk, eggs, bread instead of like gushers?
Honestly, no. I
No.
honestly I honestly think that's like a little bit insulting of government to do that. I think it's insulting. Like I think people should just spend their food stamps money on food. And like if they're buying gushers with it, like how long are they going to be doing that for? Like I mean their whole life? Great. Like that's one person who's like a casualty of the gusher, epidemic, but like yeah. I don't know. I think it's a little insulting. I think people should be able to buy what they want and if they
Isn't
make
it equally insulting to say that someone isn't going to be able to feed themselves and so the government has to provide that for them?
No. So like I think so basically like your main point is the most important one, that this is the main reason for the class divide, because my main argument is almost like a counter argument backwards. Like I don't think this is the main reason at all for like the class divide. So because of all these other reasons that I think contribute to the class divide, it seems to me like extremely unfair to pin the blame of people's circumstances on themselves in most cases. People get born into, with inherited wealth that we have, like the main, or like 50% of people who are wealthy, it's because they inherited their wealth. As far as I've seen. I don't know if that's true. But like that, to me it says like, well, it seems unfair that people just are wealthy so predominantly because they're born into it, and obviously people are not wealthy because they're born into that. No, there are so many exceptions, but I don't necessarily think that like it's the onus should be on someone being born into poverty to pull themselves out of poverty. I don't think that's fair. It's like, hey, here's this shitty situation that history has put you in. Like, pull yourself out of it. I think that it makes sense for like an organization such as the government to do what can be done. I don't necessarily mean checks from the government. I think there should be much more broad ways of distributing wealth. I basically don't think that wealth should just continue going to the people who own the resources and own, yeah, continue going to the people who are already wealthy, basically. So yeah, so I don't think social welfare helps very much at all with poverty. I think it helps a little, but within the system we have, it seems like it doesn't help a lot. So I think I sort of agree with you on like it not working. And do you have the belief like the government does it to keep people poor? Because I know some people believe that. I kind of can agree with that in certain ways. But yeah, so I've said a lot. So
No, that's okay. I don't remember if I made that argument the last time we talked, but I certainly cast some sort of allegation at the Democratic Party for intentionally subjugating inner city minorities
sure,
to, I don't call it gerrymander votes for themselves, not excluding or not saying the Republicans are not culpable
sure,
of also trying to manipulate the voter base. But in
sure,
that particular example, I think that's true.
sure.
Does the government do that? Kind of. I
Yeah,
think the government wants to constantly expand its power and scope, specifically the federal government, and that is one excellent way to do that. If people rely on you for money that they're using for food or food stamps, they're going
yeah,
to pay you a lot more mind.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, no, I think it's true, but people also need the money and stuff. Like people, there's like
So we
10. Yeah,
I want to take a specific example because
yeah,
I take exception to a few of the things that you said. We
yeah,
share a common ancestor or two common
yeah, yeah.
ancestors,
Adam and
and
Eve.
they no, they were well, one of which was a first generation immigrant to the United
Yeah,
States at the age of 7,
yeah,
from Eastern Europe, didn't speak the language, but both people were, I would say, extremely frugal, extremely hard workers, and were willing to self sacrifice every standard of living imaginable
yeah.
to provide a better one for their children. Now, based on what you said earlier, you take a problem with someone being able to do that and then pass their wealth down to their children.
That's not like that story is so romantic, but it's a small percentage of like how people earn their wealth that they
It
then
didn't
pass down.
used to be. It didn't used to be.
Okay. Well,
I think,
yeah.
oh, go ahead. Go
It
ahead.
probably becomes a smaller and smaller percentage over time. Like the more wealth gets concentrated by certain people, so more wealth is being passed down that was made essentially through financial gain rather than through like hard labor and like, like respectable work. Like, you know what I mean? Like it gets more and more concentrated. So nowadays, like people are born into families with hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, not because their parents or grandparents often, I'm saying, did hard work, but because they owned a fact or like owned some resource or owned something like that and made the extra money that the employees didn't make, essentially, is how I see it. So like yeah, I just think that like it's one experience essentially, and like so many other people's experience, like black people, for instance, you're born into a family, your family wasn't allowed to accrue wealth for what, hundreds of years or something, and let alone you were the property. You weren't allowed to accrue property. So, there are just so many counterexamples of like people who they didn't even have that choice to accrue wealth and so on. So, I have a huge problem with how wealth is distributed. I do think that it's wrong and needs to be changed. Is it through social welfare programs? Maybe a small part of it, but like basically, I feel like the laws need to change so that rich people keep less of their money. Frankly, like
How much is the right amount?
I have no idea, and I would listen to experts. I would listen to experts because it's fairly straightforward on my end. It's like the rich people need to give to the poor, like Robin Hood said. But I don't actually claim to like know the details of here's what the graduated tax should be and so on. But no, I think 10% of US families didn't have enough food last year. You know what I mean? That's just like a common thing that we have. We have like starving children in this country, like millions of them.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know what that statistic was in Ethiopia, for example?
No.
I doubt you do off the top of your head.
Actually.
I'd be really impressed.
That'd be so good. I tried to prepare. Damn it. You asked. I couldn't determine that you were going to ask me that.
It's easy to critique the current system.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it isn't culpable of certain transgressions that can and should be fixed.
Sure.
But it's also really important to look at it comparatively to other nations and look at the way that other things are trying.
Yeah.
I could argue that perhaps, trigger warning, Venezuela. I'm going to use
I appreciate
it. You could argue that the current situation under Nick Maduro is a direct function of trying to do what you're saying.
My understanding is Venezuela is in no way socialist. So you can tell me if I'm wrong, but like apparently like 70-80% of companies are privately owned, like an enormous amount of, or like more than that. Just the economy is like private and capitalist. Like there's nothing socialist that I've ever understood. How are they like socialist?
Could you say the same argument for China though? I mean, it's a state-controlled market economy, so it's not
right.
A real. If you don't have actual liberty and agency apart from the federal government, you don't. It isn't really yours ever. It's yours until it isn't.
Oh, I totally agree. I basically think if the state's going to control the economy, then the state has to be the most vulnerable worker people for it to be a socialist thing. But it's obviously not in China. And like, I mean, yeah, it's just a state capital. They do capitalism very well. They seem to know what they're doing with capitalism.
China?
Yeah. They seem to know exactly what. I don't know. Yeah. So if I'm yeah, it's a really good issue to talk about. It's maybe not super clear the way I'm explaining my views, but yeah, I think there's so much wrong with how the economies globally are set up that I don't think social welfare has enough of a positive impact, but I don't necessarily think it has the exact negative impacts you're saying. And I don't know what libertarians would suppose to do, and maybe it's a good time to switch to the healthcare stuff. What do libertarians say? So what else should be done, for the starving families in America or the, people who didn't have access to healthcare because the policies were too expensive before ACA and stuff? How do you suppose we take care of these very real people who need things now?
Do you want to talk about healthcare? We can do it.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to switch too much because I could say more about the other stuff too.
Let's go back to it later because there were a few things that you mentioned that.
Totally. Totally.
Someone in the chat was putting some questions that.
Really?
John Zlock was talking about some stuff, and I wanted to respond to it.
But hell yeah, do it.
Well, all right. No, later. Let's go back to it.
Okay.
You've piqued my interest with the Medicare.
We have 7 people watching.
We're literally famous.
No one is starving in Africa. Someone just said in the chat. In America. In America. My bad. Okay, good. We got smart people watching us.
Yeah, that's true. This is probably what
Wait, is that not ironic? Is that a serious comment? No one's starving in America? Oh, I thought it was ironic. Is that a serious comment?
I don't
Oh,
know.
okay. Trust me, bro. People are starving in America if that's a serious comment. Okay.
His previous comment was that the stats are illuminating in the US, mostly abuse cases. So I think he's alleging that people aren't starving because they don't have money or access to food. They're starving because their parents are abusing them. I think that's the
That is a wild claim. Whatever. Okay, whatever.
Or negligence potentially.
Okay. People are hungry. Trust me.
So all right. So you want to talk about medical stuff. So I was listening to a conversation between Senator Mike Lee. He's a senator from Utah, fairly conservative, libertarian. I think he's ranked one of the most conservative members of Congress. And he was talking with your favorite person in the world, Lobster Daddy Red Skull.
Oh, nice.
Jordan Peterson. And they were talking about healthcare. And Senator Mike Lee was making the proposal, wasn't really stumping for it, but they stumbled upon this topic. He was saying more free market would be a good thing. And I agree with him. I don't pretend to know all of the solutions to our healthcare problem because it's a very complex one, multivariable, not something you can just say, oh, it's easy, just institute this law and you're good to go. No, I don't think it's that simple. However, we have the worst of both worlds currently. We have enough regulation that healthcare is expensive to provide and there's a low amount of choice, but it isn't single payer and state controlled. So you lose out on all of the economies of scale and efficiencies that you would have in a single payer system.
Right.
So currently we have the worst of both worlds meeting, and it results in not a great experience to the consumer.
Yeah, that sounds true. Yeah.
I think more of a free market with fewer regulations would make more sense. I think that medical care needs to be more stratified. I don't think you need to go to the emergency room or see a physician about every little thing. Sure. It would make more sense. And we're seeing a tiny bit of a trend towards more PAs instead of just going to an MD.
Oh, yeah.
But the insurance agency does not make sense. I mean, frankly, you shouldn't have health insurance, period, if you want it to be economically efficient. I believe you would consider it a dead weight loss, I think, to have insurance. And maybe someone can correct me on that. But
you don't think there should be health insurance at all?
Why? Why should there be?
So, like, if someone with, like, no money gets sick, who's going to pay for it?
So presumably you would have localities dealing with that as best as possible. So like someone's direct community or church if they don't have money for it.
Well, the problem is, I mean, so that you're basically saying have organizations that are not the government do the role of the government, basically? Like,
you're the one saying it's the role of the government. I don't
know, but the role we currently have the government doing. Yeah, you're saying just kind of they don't do it well. Let other organizations help support people. But I think that just passes the buck to organizations that, for example, when I used to live in Louisiana, like the what was it called? Not the Catholic Church. It was like the Catholic Charities was like one of the biggest nonprofits, and I think they're totally legit and good, but I can imagine like 50 years ago, they like wouldn't help LGBT people or, I'm like kind of making this up. I'm not 100% sure, but like you have certain restrictions that would be different than the government's restrictions, or you could have like, hey, I don't like that guy. He's a drug abuser or something like that. I don't want to help him like with his healthcare or something. I think why let other smaller organizations that could have different biases do it rather than come up with a system for like how we want things to run in general?
I just want to say I'm totally okay with that, and I would be in favor of having drug tests for people who are receiving government handouts in general.
Man, there's like it's such a small percentage of like government spending. The one thing I want to say when we're talking about all this is like I think the government wastes so much money on like building all the newest military equipment or something.
What do you think the proportion is? Because I do know those numbers.
if you stop giving, wait, what were we talking about? Healthcare to a drug abuser. How are they going to get clean?
Institutionalize them or
Who
hold them
pays for that?
voluntarily.
Who
Yeah,
pays?
yeah, I'm okay with the federal government paying for that. I'm not okay with us doing this catch and release type thing with medical care provided free to people who need to be institutionalized or need to be held against their will. Someone who is, I think drug addiction should be looked at as a public health crisis. I'm
Yeah.
totally cool with that.
Yeah.
Current method by which we provide free medical care for these people, aka the taxpayer covers the cost, and then they get released back into society as though they have their own agency, is not acceptable.
I'm just confused about what you're saying because the institutionalization is the medical care. I mean, working like a rehab that someone goes to when they're like addicted to heroin or something. Like they're going because they get free, like say they're going because they're on Medicaid, so they get the government, paying for their treatment. So they go to.
People who are addicted to heroin are not going to some sort of rehab facility where they have orderlies and it's in a nice like upstate
I know.
area.
No, I know. Wait, I'm just trying to say. No, I'm just trying to understand. So I guess you're talking more about like government should not give like food stamps or other things. But if you talk about healthcare, like specifically, like how do you kick people off healthcare for being addicted to drugs when the only way to get them clean is from using healthcare? They need to go to these
I
institutions.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe I should rephrase. If I said that they shouldn't have access to any healthcare, I apologize. That's
Yeah,
not what I
maybe
mean.
you didn't mean that. Maybe you didn't say that. You meant other things like welfare and stuff.
I think
Like,
you take away some of their agency and liberty if you're going to be providing them with healthcare against their will. If you're treating someone for some sort of mental illness or a drug addiction, I think that in order to provide healthcare for them, you should not be allowing them to go back out onto the street and have agency and decision making.
I 100% get that, but to keep them in an institution, like I worked at a rehab that was a residential facility and not a nice one, like one for people coming right out of prison or who were rich. It was all kinds of people. But like the people who went like to keep them there, we needed people paying obviously. And we were very lucky to be a big charity and we had a bunch of local private donors. So we were able to keep people there for 6 months or 9 months when insurance would only pay 3 months if we were lucky. And
So it sounds like it worked without the government stepping in.
that's one really good example though. And really
Thank you for making my point.
no, but I think you shouldn't use anecdotal examples because this place was unique. That's a unique thing to be able to do that. That's not a normal thing. So like most places, like really most places in America, people can only go to rehab for like a month. And that's rich people. Like can only go to rehab for a month. So like what I'm saying to you is like if like what how do you want and drug addiction is actually a really good subject for the determinism argument because you get into questions about like are people freely addicted to drugs? Like where is the line where someone addicted to any drug but say heroin, meth, crack or something, where's the line where they're like making the bad decision versus just like suffering with a condition? You know what I mean?
I think that if we're going to bring determinism back into it, the more certain systems and certain people are more easily modeled with a deterministic framework. And if you're addicted to drugs and your brain just exists to get that high again, you're going to be a lot more deterministic than someone who is more balanced.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that means it's less of their choice that they're making bad decisions.
I agree. I think they have less agency.
So they shouldn't be punished.
I didn't say anything about punished. In order to actually help them and try to make progress on the situation, you can't afford them the same agency and give them the benefit of the doubt that you give to someone else receiving healthcare.
Right. So what like welfare or privileges should be taken away from someone who's suffering with a condition that's not fully within their control?
Disposable income. Typically, yeah, I would say garnishing or heavily restricting their disposable income. If you're heavily addicted to drugs, you really can't be trusted with $100 in your pocket.
100%, but the government's not the one giving drug addicts disposable income. Like that, like
Even through welfare?
I don't think that's a big thing. I think drug addicts are getting their disposable income from a bunch of shady ways, but I don't think it's necessarily
Like what?
like family, friends, or like selling drugs or doing illegal activity or something. But like I don't necessarily know that welfare is something like stimulating drug addiction. But like it goes into like positive and negative reinforcement because like someone suffering with things like you could say, well, let's take away these good things and then they'll be motivated to get them back. I believe studies show that positive reinforcement works better than negative reinforcement in most cases. So like what I think is like you give them a place to stay, you give them a community, you give them whatever they need healthcare wise and so on. Some of these people have like serious medical conditions, and then you teach them that like life can be okay without drugs, and that's the best way to do things, and that costs a lot of money, and they can't pay for it in most cases, and we don't want drug addicts to have to pay for it because then we're disincentivizing treatment in a certain way. But I think all the Medicare and Medicaid stuff, like it's easier for me to argue for that than welfare in general because I know it better from experience, and also it's just like more uncontroversial. But basically, yeah, I think like great way to spend money. Let's pump it into the system and make it so that people don't have to pay so much for insurance. Because I think you need insurance to pay for things like this when someone's like, when no one else, who else is going to pay for it? Like church and stuff. Seriously, like in most places, an organization like I worked at could never exist, like uh, because there's not enough people who want to pay for it.
Do you think there'd be potentially, you gave an example of people who would be willing to pay for it. Do you think potentially if you allowed people to keep more of their own money, that they would choose to reallocate some of those resources towards programs like what you described?
It's an interesting question, and it comes up a lot in these sort of conversations. Like, if private charity could replace government spending,
I would
fantastic. I
much
don't,
prefer that. It could be
yeah,
done on a more individualistic basis. People who actually know and care about the success of an individual rather than the government looking at people as numbers and heads. I think a very personal problem like drug addiction or lack of access to healthcare is not something that the government, the federal government especially, should be in the business of. It doesn't make sense. It's a highly personal, caring type service, and that's not what the federal government is there for. It should be a measure of last resort.
I get what you're saying. I just don't think I don't think that adds up when you scale it up to like how many millions of people are dealing with, drug addiction or any problem. Like you could say, well, like it's a personal issue, it needs personal attention, but like we can't give personal attention to every problem in a system that's got to take care. Like there are people who no one personally cares about. You know what I mean? Like in their life at that time, maybe no one cares about them or something like that. And that sucks. But a lot of people find themselves in that situation because the people around them suck. And like, who's going to help them there? Like, they could find organizations. I don't know. I don't like the government in general. I just think it makes sense to allocate resources and give them to vulnerable people when they need them. And I don't think the government programs that we're talking about do that very well. I think they're like band-aids on a gushing system, but like, and I agree with that point you were saying that we sort of have the worst of both worlds of socialism and capitalism with our healthcare system. I think it makes sense to say, well, let's maybe do what other countries do. They seem to be doing things pretty well. Things seem pretty fine. I mean, I know there are probably some bad stories and so on, but like if you really like it seems like people are pretty happy in a lot of these other countries. They're happy with their healthcare. They love their NHS, they love their stuff in the other countries. It seems like people like having single payer. Like I I so I would say, well, let's do that rather than no insurance at all, which is like it just feels like the Wild West. Like what could happen? Why not go with what we have? But yeah, Medicaid, like it just pumps all this money into making it so that millions of people can have stuff paid for them without, and they probably sometimes abuse it, here and there. But I would assume that the vast majority of people are just like, oh, cool, I can go to a dentist for free or therapy.
I guess this makes me a staunch libertarian to dream about a world where I walk into a hospital, say, "Hi, I'd like some healthcare, please." And I look at a menu of, "Oh, okay, well, I broke my bone. I can get an x ray. That'll be $30. Okay. And I would like a cast to set it in. That'll be $70. Okay. Here's
Well,
$100. Thank you." And then you walk out.
I mean, even if they're thousands of dollars, I would kill to just know what I'm gonna fucking spend when I go into a fucking hospital. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
We can agree on this.
Oh,
So
we
the
agree about a lot. Yeah. And you said insurance companies shouldn't exist or something? Or I
yeah,
agree. I just think we should have insurance. I just don't like the company part of it.
interesting.
What
So who's then deciding whether or not you get a life-saving procedure? That
government
Joe
bureaucrats.
Biden?
Yeah,
Yeah, actually
Papa
no.
Papa Joe Biden. But when I say that, I say it like believing that we can have a system where qualified people make those decisions in reasonable ways. I don't think it's fair to just assume that any organization like the government is always going to be corrupt and so on. So sometimes when you make points like that, I'm like, I make a face or something because I kind of disagree. Or when you make a point that says like the government inherently,
Can I respond?
yeah.
I'm itching. I'm quite sorry. I don't mean
No,
to
no,
interrupt.
no, no, no. I was good.
Government doesn't have to always violate your civil liberties in order for it to be a really bad idea to willingly hand over more and more power. You gave
Yeah.
examples of previous times in America where the government explicitly prohibited black people from owning property
Yeah.
or acquiring wealth. That same government, I am not okay with handing over power to say, "You know what? You seem to be pretty reasonable people that are interested in me. I'm going to give you the authority to take care of this and just trust that you'll always do that."
I guess that's what I'm saying, though. It's not the same government. It's not like technically the same.
Sure it is.
Like, there's no reason to. They're different, unique people. Like we can. There. It's a system. We can design the system better. I hate the way the government's designed. I think there could be a million improvements. I think it should grow and change. But like, I don't think it's fair to say like, oh, like we could never trust the government to make decisions about people's care because like no one inherently is less able to do that just because they work in the government. I don't think that's the case. I don't trust people at a church more. I don't trust people at a company more. I just think it's a bias, honestly.
Can I ask you, do you trust your family with that decision more than you trust the federal government?
Yes, but I wouldn't
Why?
ask because they love me. But I wouldn't ask.
And
I wouldn't.
and
But other people don't have that. Not everybody has a loving family. Like so, like I. What do they do? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people whose families suck or like they're just not there for them, and it's like they need a big government family. They need someone to take care of them. Who else is
I
going to do
don't
it?
agree with that.
Their church? That's your solution? Like people don't fucking want to deal with their church in a lot of situations. They're like, I don't want the church. Like the church isn't always able, willing, or there to help people. And I don't think it should. The role of the church. I think that's ridiculous.
Okay, how about your local community? The notion of the federal government as your caretakers is a very disgusting, queasy analogy to me, and I think is historically ignorant of the various atrocities that federal governments or large governments commit when
Yeah.
handed over that sort of agency over people's lives.
I mean, I agree. I think ideally it would be the community taking care of people. I just don't think that exists. Like, we don't have that infrastructure. Like, we don't have communities that are consistently always able to meet the needs of all the people living there. Like,
Because the government's sapping so much wealth out of the hands of people who would be able to make that happen.
but they're doing that to benefit their friends and loved ones and themselves. And like, not that that's a good thing, but like that's because the system's designed poorly and we could change things so that like the government does meet the I'm not a fan of the government. I just think with the infrastructure we have, it makes sense to use it to help the vulnerable people. I would prefer having no government and just having communities supporting people. Like I just don't think we have that situation.
John's Lock in the chat is posting quite a bit about some of the some of the topics you were talking about, specifically drugs and healthcare, as it relates to San Francisco.
Oh, cool.
May I ask if you know about that situation, or if you could speak to how you think the local government has done in terms of managing the homeless and the drug issue in San Francisco?
I don't know. Is he saying they've done bad? I would believe that.
He is saying that they've done bad. And
Yeah.
I think he's making the argument that the type of thinking that you're using to allocate this decision making to the federal government is similar to how San Francisco has tried to do it and has failed spectacularly.
So who should do it? Because that's an even smaller government.
Yeah, smaller communities.
To who?
The smallest type, family first. If someone doesn't have family, church, or community.
There are so many situations where people's families can't pay for their, like, if we're talking about drugs, like, pay for their rehab. I would say it's the majority of probably cases. Or they don't want to because the drug addicted person has stolen from them or pissed them off, and they don't want to support them. But
so to what extent do we allocate resources as a society trying to save the life of one person?
Right. So yeah, I mean, to what extent do we care about anyone's life? I mean, that's the question.
At $1 million, I think. No, I'm serious.
So but it doesn't cost $1 million to take care of an individual person in any case. I mean, that's not what we're talking about. Pretty much. I mean.
Yeah, it's true. It maybe not $1 million, certainly not, but it is a lot cheaper if you throw them in prison.
Well, yeah, and do you think that's good? I mean,
No.
okay, yeah, because it's not totally fair to put the onus on me of figure out how to solve everything without knowing what your solution is. Because I'm not saying I think the government is doing a good job. I'm saying we have a system right now. It's extremely messed up, but I am thinking about the millions of people who rely on it. And so I'm wondering, well, what are you going to do for them? And it's all well and good to say family first and community, but what does that mean in practice? Does that actually work? If today we ended Medicare and Medicaid, what would happen? Probably millions of premature deaths. I think that's bad and avoidable. And everything I'm saying about the government spending money on things is just because we don't have any other better way to do it. Those community organizations that would be taking care of people in San Francisco and anywhere, they need to get paid. And we're just starting to see, I don't mean to just talk about drug abusers because that's what I am familiar with from my work, but drug abusers were basically, a huge portion of the population is okay with them dropping dead. Is okay with people who use drugs just dropping dead. And I'm not saying you think that. I assume you probably have plenty of, caring for these people. But that would be a large response of a lot of people. And I think we need a reasonable organization to provide for people who are vulnerable in the cases where.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll throw something out there.
Yeah.
Get rid of or extraordinarily minimize the scope of and funding of the DEA and allocate that to a public health clinic type service provided for people with drugs. Would that be agreeable to you?
Yeah, I mean, everything I'm saying about providing resources, I don't want them to print money. I think it should be taken from shitty government institutions. Yeah. The DEA. I mean, yeah, sure. Yeah.
How much do you think we spend on healthcare? Medicare and Medicaid combined.
I don't have the ability.
You made the comparison to military spending. You're like, build a few less bombs this year, and
yeah. Well, we spend what, $800 billion on the military every year.
Yep, pretty close. A little bit less, but yeah.
So what's healthcare then?
A little over $1 trillion.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Social Security is another $1 trillion, which is a topic in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the money's there. I don't care if it costs that much. It's ridiculous to spend $800 billion on defense. It's absurd. We're just enriching. We're not actually defending ourselves. I refuse to believe that. We're just paying contractors. We're just paying.
Okay, so I think both can be true.
Yeah.
We are grossly overspending in the military,
Yeah.
and most of it is being spent on inefficiencies that
Mhm.
could be cut out. Also, it's extremely important to have a national defense
Sure.
because I don't want to be a Uyghur in China.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, some national defense, but it seems probably pretty excessive.
How
I
much is enough?
I don't know. I mean, there are people who know so much more about this than me. I wouldn't try to even say that I know.
Don't minimize your own intelligence. You're a smart, critical thinker.
I think that's intelligence, is knowing when you don't know. Like I would have to
True.
read. Yeah, you'd have to read all these people who study this. What should we spend money? But just to go back to healthcare for a second, I looked it up recently, and I think U.S. has some of the highest healthcare costs in the world of like the cost that you pay as the
Yep.
consumer. And the apparently the main reasons for that, and there are probably other ones, I'm sure there are like dealing with the health insurance companies is a huge waste of resources for most providers, and which would be solved through single payer. And what was the other one? Um,
Federal funding to colleges inflating the price and putting doctors in debt.
Federal funding to colleges, inflating, putting. So you think the government funding colleges makes it so colleges can charge more money, so then people go into more debt? But I can totally grant that. But you realize that's not the government's fault. 100%. That's 50% the government's fault. 50% the other people who are benefiting from that at the universities. You know what I mean? Like any time when the government would be doing something to give people money, you need to also blame those people, not just the government for doing it. You know?
I understand what you're saying. It's sure from a personal responsibility standpoint, yes. Also, from a policy standpoint, it's moot to judge the people at the university level. It makes more sense to judge the people creating the policy that allows for that behavior to take place. People are going to people. They're going to respond to incentives that they see in the market. If that incentive is access to easier money, they're going to take it.
So, what incentives do you think the government or whoever's in power should create or sustain? Like, in
With
yeah,
respect to this particular
yeah,
topic,
like if or just with healthcare in general, I guess. Like, I don't know. I guess that's a vague, pretty like overbroad question.
that's a big
But
one.
that is the question that I think we'll come back to a lot because I feel like that's the question that comes up a
Yeah,
lot.
I think the government should probably be in the business of punishing large scale mal I don't want to say malpractice, but nefarious practices or where you are knowingly injuring a large portion of the population. Like if a pharma company puts out a drug that they know is going to kill half of the people that take it, that seems like a good thing to be punishing. But in general, I'm in favor of stripping almost all of the regulation that exists for the FDA and surrounds the medical industry in general. One other thing I want to say about really high healthcare costs that America pays compared to other countries. Someone made this point to me a long time ago, and I haven't actually researched how much of a role it plays, but the fact that the United States and pharma companies within the United States are performing and responsible for the vast majority of pharmacological innovation in the world,
Hmm.
and the other countries around the world get to enjoy all of that innovation on drugs that the United States creates, but we are the ones eating the R&D costs that get passed on through our health insurance providers because we're price indiscriminate. You walk
Yeah.
into a hospital, like you said, and doctor doesn't say it's $100. They just say, okay, we can do that. And then the bill shows up and it's 15 grand. And you're like, okay, I'm not paying it. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just if those costs are like raised because of R&D, like I find that like a little objectionable because like the same exact like those companies that are doing R&D like are paying their executives billions and millions and billions of dollars. And so like I find it hard to say, "Oh, well they're passing the cost onto the consumer." because like they're taking as much as they can and then passing the cost. And like, so why not say like, well, costs are high because these corporations are able to extract as much profit as they want from people's healthcare, rather than costs are high because, I, I, I don't know, rather than costs are high because, uh, you know, they're doing a really good job and like helping us by researching all this stuff. It's like they could do all that research and it could cost less if they paid themselves less. And like,
Where's the incentive to do it? Of all of the high costs within the healthcare system, extreme innovation that improves our lives in a measurable way is not something I want to disincentivize.
do you know who funds all that research?
Yeah, pharma companies.
You don't think they get grants from the government and stuff to pay for their research?
Uh, no, I don't think like Merck is getting grants from the government to fund. I think that when they hit it big on a drug that works and gets passed by the FDA, they pull in billions of dollars from it and extract as much value because one out of 100 drugs might actually be successful.
Yeah. Do you mind if I take a minute intermission and use the bathroom really quick? Or
Other topics coming up, by the way, for the viewers that are here. We're going to be getting into guns and policing, and we'll touch on George Floyd and Derek Chauvin and that trial. I've been following that. And we can also get into the Dante Wright killing that recently happened, among others.
yeah, we can move on if you want. The one thing I just want to say is like, I can listen to all my left wing people who tell me, my way of seeing it. You can listen to Mike Lee, Jordan Peterson. I think, frankly, we should listen to public health professionals, not necessarily in the government, just people who study this. There are so many things, and I thought of this before, especially with police brutality and other stuff that we're going to talk about. I don't know a lot of the empirical things that I would need to know to have an educated discussion. Really, I almost feel like irresponsible in certain ways. Like there, at a certain level, there's like empirical facts that need to be known to have these discussions in educated ways, facts that I do not know. And so I would say I would always want to listen to public health professionals, people who study systems in the United States and understand it in way more depth than I do. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
I would say the same, but I'd probably put my faith in an economist rather than a public health professional, unless you think that that can be the same person.
I think you could listen to economists and public health professionals. Like, I don't think you should ever have to choose. But no, in a general sense, I don't think there should be a profit incentive in public health at all. And
What about for doctors?
I think they should make a substantial amount of money and enough to support themselves. And I'm a therapist. Like, I could make the same amount of money I make and have the organization I make not make profit. They don't need to make the amount of profit they make from my work for this work to happen. And I think it's the same with doctors. They would maybe get paid a little bit less, as I think they do in some countries. But
so what's allowing them to extract as much money as possible? I would argue it's insurance.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, yeah.
If you had like airline insurance, and when you bought a plane ticket, it's like, I don't care if the price is $2,000 to go cross country. I'm not paying for it.
Yeah. Again, this gets into stuff I probably don't understand as well as I should, but like, I guess I think it's like, I agree in the sense that it's the insurance companies. The interactions between the providers and the insurance companies create an inflated high cost. And that's because the insurance companies are making profit. And that's an organization we don't need at all, let alone making profit. And if we did need an insurance organization, I would want them not making profit, essentially. Yeah. But, it's one thing to make enough money to survive. It's another to make enough money to pay your executives like $20 million a year.
20 million isn't 1 trillion, but I get what you're saying.
We're talking about one person compared to millions of people.
Is that it feels like a separate issue to me, because I certainly don't think that the handful of CEOs making millions of dollars in the healthcare industry are what is bankrupting the healthcare industry.
Oh, no, I don't.
Maybe it looks repugnant to you, but it certainly isn't the driver of the financial insolvency.
No, it's a sign that too much money is being made by the wrong people on other people's healthcare. I don't think we need people making millions of dollars from organizing this system that's not working well. You know what I mean? It's like, cool, you work for you're the CEO of of fucking Blue Cross. Like, are you really doing so much great work that you deserve like $200 million a year? Like, probably not. And I think that in that moral judgment is saying like, well, I think our system's not set up properly.
Dude, the CEO of Blue Cross is not making $200 million a year.
How much do you think they're making?
At least an order of magnitude less than that. But I don't know, probably like 5 to 10
Blue
mil.
Cross's CEO's compensation tumbled from 19 million to 12 million. So I mean, yeah, it's one order of magnitude less. Yeah, it's to me, it's the same point though. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, I mean, we could talk about that all day, but yeah, I don't think there should be profit in healthcare. I mean, just to me, it's done in so many other countries and it seems to work. But I don't know, whatever. Our system does not work for a vast majority of people. You can say we have the best best system for certain things for people with money. Some people say that. Yeah, but like, I mean, there's so many people who just like don't have access to. I didn't have healthcare.
If you're rich, it is the best in the world.
Sure,
for sure. You can get access to extreme specialties.
But to me, that's like, I don't care. Because to me, I always care about the majority of people.
You want the mean to be higher. I understand that.
Yeah. But
this is a tough topic to start because there's there's a very large amount of facets that immediately expose themselves as soon as you start talking about it.
Yeah.
It's a daunting one to get into. I don't want the entire podcast today to be about healthcare.
Okay, yeah.
We'll
come back to it.
But there's certainly more to say, so perhaps you can revisit it. It's not going anywhere.
Totally. You're the boss. You're the boss. This is
okay.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
Either guns or policing.
Let's talk about policing. Oh. Yeah. They're definitely related.
Give me your hot take on policing in the United States of America as of 2021.
I got you. I don't think the police should have guns at all. I don't think they should exist, first of all. But I think there's a slow transition or maybe fast transition.
Guns or police shouldn't exist.
What?
You said you don't think they should exist. Guns or police?
Oh, I mean, I'd like it if guns didn't exist, but I feel like that's impossible. So that's like ridiculous to me. Like, I would love it, but it's a ridiculous thing. So they're going to exist. We can't get rid of them. We can't take them away from people without more innocent people dying. So like we can't take the guns away from people. I don't know how that could possibly work. But like, the police, that's an organization we created. Guns we created, but it's an organization. So I think we can get rid of the police. I don't think they do a good job. I think they do a terrible job at what they're supposed to be doing. Public safety, I think they do a terrible job of it.
Would you want to replace them with something else, or would your system look more like anarchy?
It's one and the same. I think what anarchists say is like, you replace it with basically what you were saying for healthcare. I mean, in a general sense, like you replace it with community level and more broad, diverse ways of approaching the problems. There's no reason we need the same organization that like, tries to track down a murderer to be the same organization that like, goes to a domestic abuse like situation. You know what I mean? It could be just different organizations. I think they have a monopoly of power that they don't need to have. So, and they don't use it well. So. But again, I feel so bad talking about this because I haven't even read like the basic books that people read to understand prison abolition and stuff. So I'm like not the best person to, but I have a general idea, I think. So
it is prison's separate, but it is kind of nuts how many people. I think we have 4 million people in prison right now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I don't think there should be profit in that. And I think that's the reason. You're incentivizing putting people in prison.
That's not true. Fewer than 5% of all prisons in the United States are privately owned. So even if all of them were driven purely towards incarcerating because of profit, that wouldn't account for 4 million people. I can agree with you that private prisons have a perverse incentive, but that isn't the reason why we have 4 million people in prison.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I didn't mean to say it was. Yeah, there's much more broad reasons that we have people in prison. It's not just because it's profitable, but there shouldn't be the infrastructure of people making their livings from this. Like the whole system's entirely broken. We're basically just throwing people in a cage to maintain a not working system. I think it's dehumanizing.
On purpose? Do you think it's...
No, I mean, I think it's just the momentum of a terrible system. Police originated in slave catching groups essentially, and so like we have like the result is just the result of like racism and state power enforcing like dehumanizing policies, and now we have what we have.
Are you alleging that law enforcement started from catching slaves? Period.
Like I don't think it's man, again, like I wish I've read more by this point, but like yeah, my understanding is that like modern day American police come from serving that function or a similar function in regards to slaves. But either way, it's state violence. I don't think the state should have a monopoly on violence. I don't think they should have these squads of police in every single county of the country that serve basically like a wide variety of functions. Some they perform well, some they don't. But I just think they need to be broken up completely, and the power needs to be given to communities themselves, not to these little bodies of people. Yeah.
So now you're in on the distribute the power to the communities. I'm
Yeah,
glad
because
we could find common ground.
No, because I actually think this is a role that the communities could play. I think it makes less sense to give all the violent power to police than it makes to give all the, I don't know, like insurance power to an organization. I don't know. This is a hard.
At risk of making a cartoon out of your proposal, are you thinking like Neighborhood Watch with their flashlights?
No. And again, I feel so bad because like I'm not the best person to be talking about this. I really at all. Like I haven't read like any of the important works on prison abolition. So I can't explain exactly like how it would work, but I don't think there's any reason to assume it is working. It's like it's clear that the police are killing a vast majority of people like unnecessarily. Not a majority, a vast number. A vast number of people. Hundreds and hundreds every year in America just killed who are innocent. And like that's like ridiculous. Like they're not doing their job well. And they get trained by like psychos, and then they go out and like act like psychos. And that doesn't happen all the time, but yeah, I basically think that the power to do policing needs to be given to other people, like not the people who we already assume are the police. I don't think that's a Neighborhood Watch. I just think like it's not working how it is. So I guess we could start by the neighborhood watching the police, essentially. Like I think police just need way more oversight from the communities. That would be the first step. So basically, instead of like, say, the mayor deciding who the police chief is, the citizens of the community would decide who the police chief is. And same goes for all the rules that the police go by. So that would be like the way I would start is say, basically diversify the power to many people instead of just, a few. That would be like one of the first things that comes to mind for me.
Even though the mayor's an elected official?
Yeah. Because there's no, it seems like why not just add another layer of democracy to it?
Does it bother you then that we elect the president and the president chooses their vice president and the head of the EPA and the head of the ATF?
It's an interesting question.
And the executive branch as well as the judicial branch?
That's an interesting question. Kind of, yeah. I know. I guess I didn't really think about it, but yeah. I don't like that. I don't really like that. It's not a great, I don't know. It's not a great thing. Yeah, why not? Why can't we just vote on more?
We used to not be able to, but
Really?
direct democracy has become a lot more reasonable to try to enact because we have cell phones and
Yeah.
we can verify your identity a lot better than you could remotely. You don't have to travel by pony to get to a major metropolitan area anymore.
Yeah.
So it's possible that we could do more direct democracy. It's also possible that the incumbents in power are not in the interest of abdicating that power to a distributed network. Focused power means that I have more power if I am at the reins. And
Oh yeah.
people don't want to give that up.
No, definitely. No, but I do think it's kind of weird that and like appointing lifetime judges and stuff. I think that's stupid. I think it's very stupid. I think there's no reason why we couldn't have more direct control over things. I mean, I think Congress should be like way bigger, like have way more people there, like representing areas in a more like equal way, sort of, or like populations of people in a more equal way. You know, you have like 2 senators from California. You know, it's like I think places should have more people representing them if there are more people.
You have a ton of congressmen though in California.
Yeah, like there's more people in the House, obviously, but wait,
It's
sorry.
50 congressmen from California.
Yeah. I just think there could be probably like more from like more popular places to be able to basically give them more like discrete view. But anyways, that's just to say, I think people can have more control over this stuff and not. I don't know. What were we? Why did we get to the executive?
Stop people from shooting each other if they don't have guns.
How do we stop people from shooting each other? I mean, like, I guess we can't really stop everyone from shooting each other. But I'm
really nicely.
Say what?
Just ask really, really nicely.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't think the police should have guns. That's how it is in some other countries. I don't think they need guns. Like, it doesn't help. I don't understand why they need guns.
It doesn't help?
How does it help? Like, what they show up to a situation with a gun, like, how does that help?
We've had a couple of prominent mass shootings in the last few years. Do you just like try to talk the guy down with like a megaphone and some Twinkies? Like, hey guy, like, please stop.
Okay, so we have like a different organization that's not like the local police.
That's just not calling them the police. That's still the police. That's law enforcement with firearms.
Okay, but think about all the situations a police officer has a gun that are not a mass shooting. Like,
so your argument is not that police shouldn't have guns. Your argument is that armed officers shouldn't be responding to every call.
Yeah. Well, but I also say, like, the police, as we call them, like, the police should not have guns. And if we need an organization to show up to situations where we can agree that people need guns, that should not be the police. They should be a smaller organization with a more limited responsibility. So, like, yes, I'm saying what you're saying, but also in a more, like, in another sense too. Like, people should have more specific roles for such important things.
Are you familiar?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Are you familiar with what happened in New York City with Giuliani? Under Giuliani?
No.
You know Rudy Giuliani?
I've heard of him, yeah.
So he was mayor of New York City, I want to say back in the 80s.
Okay.
I think I'm right about that.
The 1880s?
I'm wrong. I was too early. So from 94 to 2001. And he's credited for reducing the crime rate dramatically in New York City with his extreme tough on crime stance. And I believe the broken window policy was what they termed his method of, call it, ruling New York City. So they would aggressively, with armed officers, aggressively pursue any sort of small crime with the intent that it would lead to a reduction in other types of crime, because you would get criminals off the streets more generally. So you find someone shoplifting from a store, prosecute them harshly, that person can't go on to commit other crimes. This period of time is widely credited as having reduced the amount of crime in New York City, especially violent crime. over that period of time. And he did this by hiring a lot more police. There's a huge uptick in the number of police in New York City. They were able to police crime a lot more effectively. They were armed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew more about it. Are there any like counter arguments to why that credit shouldn't go to the police? Because
I'm
yeah,
sure there are, but
yeah,
I couldn't make those arguments for you.
okay, yeah. I basically I don't know enough to like argue specifically. I wouldn't assume that the decrease in crime is a result of more police. I
Okay.
mean,
I'll,
I don't know.
I'll
I
throw
mean,
something out here.
yeah, you're saying it is. I understand. Like, I basically think a more long term way to decrease crime. Because then what do you do? Like, do you just keep all those police forever? Like, is that? Yeah, I mean,
I think once you reach a certain point, it becomes self-sustaining. But similar to your argument for social programs being needed at the onset to help lift people out of a certain situation, and thus we should allocate additional resources there to help give them that initial burst. I see policing in a similar way.
I get that, but no, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I think we need an influx of a lot more police officers that are higher compensated and better trained, and that will solve most of your crime problems in certain areas. Not directly, but indirectly. And I can expound on that.
So then, can you imagine a situation where crime comes back, and if so, what causes that?
Yeah, typically industry leaving. If you look at places like Detroit, I would say
So poverty, essentially.
poverty
Yeah.
generally, yeah, is what brings back crime more than anything else. And conversely, the opposite of poverty, prosperity, is what reduces crime
I can
more
agree
generally.
with that. Yeah, I 100% agree.
But policing and increased policing, I think, is the catalyst needed to start that positive chain reaction. Why? If you have a lot more police and police are not afraid to be on every corner within a city, criminals will be less likely to commit crime. And when they do, it'll be easier to catch them and prosecute them. If you agree with that axiom, and we can debate that in a minute.
I don't agree with that, yeah.
Okay. So if you were to agree with that, I guess I won't keep going. Let's
Well,
talk
no,
about that.
no, go on. I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah.
If you can reduce crime that way, you'll have an influx of new money coming into an area to attempt to gentrify it and bring new businesses because developers and business owners will see an opportunity. They will pour money into that area, and nothing stops a bullet like a job. People who have opportunity are less willing to risk their freedom for the chance of economic prosperity if they have something stable and reliable.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I definitely agree that like prosperity and people being sufficient and doing okay like reduces crime. I just think there's a lot of like hypotheticals in that. Like a place having less crime would then bring more industry there. Like it's certainly possible, but there are other factors that could complicate that on a lot of different levels, I could
Like what?
imagine. Uh, the the maybe the state's laws about, I don't know, like taxes on a certain industry or something like that influencing whether the industry stays there, or like an industry just, I don't know, like an industry becoming less profitable and so it moves somewhere else, or outsources labor to another country or something like that, or yeah, just any factor like that. I don't want to name which would be the biggest. I could just imagine there being other factors. I just don't think it's as simple as the way you put it. I also, just to that first point you made, like I don't know that having more police officers reduces crime. I mean, if anything, like it, if we're saying that crime comes from poverty, then what does having more police officers do to like help with the poverty? Like if it doesn't do anything. So then you're saying you get rid of the crime through the police, but like how does that actually work? Like you just get people to be arrested and then go to prison or jail and then leave, and like them what? Like they're still they're just better now, and like what if industry didn't come there in the time in between, like isn't crime like the people don't go to prison and come out and like want to be like amazing all the time and never make decisions that could be illegal or anything like that. So what is putting people in prison really doing to like to help the community generally? Like you're just hoping that an industry would come there, but like
Hmm.
I it's yeah, but human lives are being thrown in a cage while we're waiting to see if it helps with business. It's just a speculation, I think, that I don't grant that like it helps with business to have more police in an area. I mean, and even if it does, I don't think that's worth it. Like, I don't think it's the way to bring business to an area just by having more police.
Do you agree with the axiom that bringing in new dollars to an area through business and investment is a way to reduce crime?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, maybe, man, I feel so out of my depth in this. Like, I'm just like, there's so much that I don't know about the prison system. But like, yeah, I would imagine that having people be more fulfilled is like the thing that reduces crime. Having people like have their needs met, essentially.
Having a father figure?
Sure, having a family that loves you, and yeah, absolutely. So like, but where are all the fathers? They're in
Oh, are you
prison.
trying to lead me to prison? Is that
They're
where
in
this is?
prison. We
Yeah, but
arrest the fucking people, and then their kids have no people there because
are
they're.
we arresting them because they're committing crimes, or are you alleging that it's for some other reason?
Do you know that like black people are sentenced to longer sentences for the same crimes than white people? Like individual black people for the.
And did you know that men are sentenced to longer crimes than women? I mean, what are
Isn't
you?
that messed up?
Uh, I'm not sure that I can say that it's messed up just by that. No.
I mean, I think of two people getting arrested for the same crime, I think they should serve the same sentence, barring other extenuating factors. But I don't think those extenuating factors should be their gender or their race. Like, I don't think you should have a worse punishment for being a man or for being black. Like, and people study this, they literally get longer sentences. That's just one factor.
I've looked into this briefly because I know that you've alleged that to me just in our private conversations.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced just by you saying people have studied this. That
Okay.
isn't enough evidence to convince me that black people are getting marginalized by a systemically racist judicial system. I
Okay.
don't buy into that. If I'm presented with sufficient evidence, I'm more than happy to change my opinion on that. But that's not what.
Here. Okay, I'm just sent a link to the Discord chat. So this is just the first thing that came up. Demographic differences in sentencing, an update to the 2012 Booker report. Sorry, I just sent you a huge PDF. I should have. So the article that linked me to that was an ABC. Okay, an ABC News article that says black men are 19.1% more likely to serve longer sentences. It's very well studied and documented. Like this one's not hard for me to find a resource for.
I'm not going to read through this right now.
Yeah,
I mean, have it pulled up on my monitor, and I'll read it afterwards. I promise.
Oh yeah, I mean you don't have to. I just think it goes to show that there's a lot of evidence for black people do serve longer terms. I mean, I think there's also evidence for example, like look at weed. White and black people smoke weed at the same rates, and black people get arrested for it. Yeah, they do. They do. This is studied too. They smoke weed at the same rates, and black people get arrested way more for it. And black people get searched more when they're driving. They get stopped more and they get searched more. And the searches, I just found this yesterday because I was like feeling so unprepared for talking to you. I was looking more into this stuff. Black people get searched more from police officers when they're driving, and the officers find less on average of illegal contraband or whatever. But no, I just think basically cops, there's a huge amount of racial bias that's implicit in police officers because they're predominantly white, and white people have racial biases, in a lot of ways. So I think you get an organization that has a lot of racial biases, and it builds up enough to these, demonstrable differences in policing.
I understand. I've tried to put myself in the shoes of someone that thinks the way that you do about this, and I understand how compelling of an argument that feels like. I don't agree. I don't agree with the systemic racism narrative being responsible for Black people being incarcerated at a disproportionately higher rate and, yeah, incarcerated at a higher rate.
What about for longer terms for the same crimes?
Like I said, I don't want to speak to something that I haven't been able to verify, but
Okay.
you did send me an article that I'm going to read.
Because
So,
what I just explained a minute ago is like they're incarcerated at a higher rate, not for the reasons you might think, but because if we look at every aspect of the incarceration process, they're disproportionately targeted, Black people and all people of color. But like if you look at the cops stopping them,
how do you know that? Sorry. How do you know?
how do I know that it extends to all people of color? Or?
Or how do you know that
Well, I
police
was gonna.
are targeting people
Well,
of
that's what I
color?
no, that's what I was gonna go on to say. Like I'm saying, like in the beginning of the process, when you have the cops stopping them, and you can look this evidence up, but I looked it up to verify. Like they're more often stopped, they're more often searched, they're more often like I think arrested. I'm not, but even if we don't look at that, like they're given longer sentences. So just those three things already, like more often stopped, more often searched, given longer sentences, those affect that like Black people being in prison more than white people. Like
Is
you
it
could,
possible that they're committing more crime?
I don't think Black people commit more crime than their proportion of the population. But even if they did, these
Why wouldn't you think that? I mean, Black people, we were just talking about this earlier. Black people or any color of person, because the skin color obviously doesn't have any impact on this,
yeah,
socioeconomic status does.
yeah,
And
exactly.
if Black people statistically earn a lower median income than other households, wouldn't you expect them to be committing more crime?
Well, then no. I mean, then you're saying poor people commit more crime. Like,
Yes.
but
Yeah, because
that's
they have
but
as
if
many
you
opportunities.
But if you say Black people commit more crime, you're comparing poor Black people to poor white people. That's
Yes.
inherently what you're doing, and I don't think that's true.
Yeah. Living in the same areas.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
that's not true. I mean, Black people don't, and you're trying to say a statement like that without addressing the first two things I said, that they're targeted by police more, searched and just like targeted because police are racist.
how do you know that it's because police are racist? I mean,
This
that's a pretty huge allegation to make
well,
without evidence.
well, racial biases exist in probably everybody, and like it's like you can study that. People can study how people respond to something on like an implicit level and what their immediate reaction is. So it's very
Is
clear.
this is the implicit bias thing where you're shown two faces and
Yeah. I mean, if you
yeah.
have like a stress response to a picture of a Black person that you don't have to a picture of a white person, like I would call that like something worth noting. You know what I mean? And but yeah, I mean, I think implicit. So do you not think that people are biased against races, or you just don't think those biases add up to a systemic problem?
I think that all people have biases, and I think that there are deep ancestral and biological reasons that human beings trust homogeneity over non-homogeneity. So I trust those that look like, act like, talk like, sound like me more than I trust people who don't. And I think that that is rooted in tribal success over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. And I don't believe that those indiscretions lead up to what you are defining as systemic racism.
Do you think racism is a problem in general in the U.S.?
Not as near not nearly as big of a one as it is currently being made out to be. And I don't think it is I think it is an outgrowth of other. I think it is an emergent property, as I would say, of other problems that are not racial in nature. So it
Sure.
looks and smells like racism, but it really isn't.
So why do like have you ever listened to I'm sure you've listened to like black people for instance talk about racism that they've experienced and that they and their families and communities have experienced. So why do they call it racism if it's not racism?
I think that they have been fed a very tantalizing excuse for victimhood.
So you don't believe that people are making their own decisions, looking at their communities and saying, "You know what? I do think the white police officers treat us worse than they treat white people because they're racist." Like you think they're just saying that cuz like the media tells them to or something.
I think that there's both happening. I think it's fair to say that they're both happening. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying that there are not racist individuals and that there are not racist cops out there. Of
No, but I'm
course
saying
there are.
that institutions are racist, and that's why you see longer sentences for black people, and that's why you see black people being arrested more for the same exact crimes that they commit
Are-
as frequently. Look at the weed statistics.
Yeah, are they smoking weed though, like on the street corner, where in plain view of cops, or are they smoking weed in a cornfield out in the middle of Nebraska? I mean, there are other factors that lead into the way someone commits a crime that could influence if you're going to get caught or not.
So to you, it's more likely that black people are just being less discreet about their weed smoking
Yeah,
rather than like police officers being racist against black people and searching them more.
I'm not making the Occam's razor of this is more or less plausible. I'm simply putting out there is another plausible explanation for what you are immediately assuming is racism. This is
What?
no different than the I can't explain where we came from, so it must be God
Oh, I mean,
argument.
man, people study this. Yeah. Again, I feel like it's silly for me to be presenting these views because so many people know so much more about it than me. But like, do you? So with being killed by the police, okay, black people are killed more than white people by the police. Do you grant that?
That is not the statistics that I have seen. No.
Okay, I'll send you another thing. Here we go. Harvard study black people more than 3 times as likely as white people to be killed during a police encounter. Are you watching the stream?
Yeah, I am. Did
Okay.
Harvard also put out the study where they are denying Asian people admission? Did they also release that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Harvard is being sued by Asian people who were denied admission because they were Asian because Harvard had too many Asian people.
Okay. That's
Makes me a little less trustworthy of this institution.
okay. So if you're watching the stream, sorry. Yeah. Surely you're not writing it off just because it's from Harvard, or I hope you're not doing that. But
Um,
yeah, black Americans are 3.23 times more likely than white Americans to be killed by police, according to a new study. So click on the study. Rates conclusions: preventing fatal police violence in different areas of the country will likely require unique solutions. Estimates of the severity of these problems, overall rates, racial inequalities, blah blah blah, in any given place are quite sensitive to which types of deaths are analyzed. Okay, that's not that interesting.
it's too small for me to read.
Oh, sorry.
You could zoom in.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Results. Sorry, MSA, what is that? Metropolitan Statistical Areas. Rates of police-related fatalities vary dramatically, with the deadliest places exhibiting rates 9 times those of the least deadly. Overall rates in southwestern places were highest, with lower rates in the northern Midwest and Northeast. Yet this pattern was reversed for black-white inequities, with Northeast and Midwest places exhibiting the highest inequities nationwide. Our main results excluded deaths that could be considered accidents, blah, blah. Sensitivity analysis demonstrated that doing so may underestimate the rate of fatal police violence in some places. Okay, black, white, and Latinx white inequities were slightly underestimated nationally by... Why is this so hard to get meaning from? Why is this so, like, many words? It's always so complicated when you actually look at the studies.
It's true. It's easier for me to just go to a news organization and have them tell me what to think.
Yeah, seriously.
Most people can't look at something like this and actually glean meaning from it.
Yeah,
You're a college educated
yeah,
top 5 percentile of intelligence in the world,
yeah.
and this is difficult to glean meaning from.
Yeah, exactly. I have a master's and it's hard. It's like the education system's like bad. Okay, so man, I don't. Well, here, let me just find another, I guess, another more clear source. Because this one says, okay, 3.23, so maybe I'll just control F for that figure and see where they say that. Okay, here we go. On average, there were large racial ethnic inequities in the rates at which white and black people were killed during police contact. Okay, so this is a very, it's a very exhaustive thing. They try to look at all the variables. Across all places, black people were 3.23 times more likely to be killed compared to white people. Latinx were just a little bit more likely. I mean, do you want to look?
I mean,
say what?
What's the X mean, Latinx?
I'm actually not super well versed in what that means.
I don't necessarily want to crawl through papers. It's not what the people want. But
okay, well, John's been sending us a bunch of papers, so I thought he would like that. Yeah, I mean, look, if you and I can't debate about whether black people are killed more frequently than white people by the police. It's meaningless. People have studied this, and it would be very silly for you and I to say.
We could try to posit why, if we accept that, if we operate on the assumption that that's true, because it's not really worth digging into. Is it or isn't it true?
I mean, it's verifiably true that black people are killed more often in police contact than white people. That is a fact. And you can look at a lot of sources and find that. So why do you think that is?
I have an answer, but you're not going to like it.
Sure. You think they act up. They act up and the police kill them. Cool. So and
I think that part of that is I think is bad parenting.
Dude, you're making so many assumptions.
Hold on. Let me finish my point. I think some of that is bad parenting, but I also think that some of it is the police escalating the encounter because they are using their prior experience to try to predict a pattern.
You think black people are worse at parenting than white people?
I think the black nuclear family is weaker than that of other races. Yeah, currently in America. I think forget about white, compare Indian or Korean to black in America. Yeah, unquestionably.
Oh, I wonder why. I mean, there's completely different histories. Obviously, black people were oppressed in different ways and for a much longer amount of time. And
I don't think that's the reason today.
So you don't think the history of slavery and persecution of black people lives on at all in our society, or obviously
I didn't say that.
So when I'm saying this kind of stuff, the history of oppression leads to black people being targeted by the police more, having more poverty, basically being held down and being in this situation. That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying to point to a family or social thing is very weird when you're then saying that it's these other historical factors that led to those family and situations. I don't think the black nuclear family has a problem. I think the problem is the way black people are treated by society and have been treated.
The black nuclear family absolutely has a problem.
I
There's
don't.
the highest rates of single motherhood of any demographic in the United States.
But that's not a problem. That's not a problem with the black nuclear family. That's a problem that results from other social problems that it can't be solved by improving familial. So how do you improve that? What do you say?
That's a better question.
So what are you saying? How do you improve? How do you improve that?
Longer days. So I have some ideas. I don't think they're fantastic ideas, but I have some. It really is a difficult problem, but it is one worth solving. Disincentivize single parent financial incentives from the federal government. That would be probably the number one. I think that it's become too financially incentivized to be a single mother. You should know.
So you think the problem with like too many families not having both parents is that women are incentivized to be single mothers?
I think that is part of it. Yeah.
Women don't want to be like, it's not like a choice. It's like, oh, my partner's not good, so I'm a single mother now. Like my partner sucks. They're doing shitty stuff. Now I'm a single
But,
mother.
so why? Okay. Why do you think the rates of single motherhood in the Black community are multiples of other races?
I don't know. I would assume that the arresting of black men is a huge part of that.
So the men are leaving because they're in handcuffs going to jail?
No,
And that,
no, just like the history and generational oppression of black people has made it so that like it's harder. Look, I don't fucking want to speculate on this shit. Why don't we just look up what an expert says?
for what it's worth, if I don't even think I need to be charitable to make this argument, but I think that there is a degree of what you're alleging there is. I really do. I think there's a genuine proportion of the inequality that we're describing or debating. I think that a portion of that is not to the fault of the individuals being persecuted for it. And I believe that there is some of that there because you're right. Everyone has a little bit of bias. And whether you want to or not, you see the world through that bias and you use stereotypes, you use prior experiences to try to make predictions about the future. It's one of the things that human brains are good at, and it's a really good survival technique. But it also makes it hard for someone trying to change their own perception of how society sees them when they're being judged based on how their dad acted or their someone in the past acted.
But
My
sorry, no, finish.
prescription is that unfortunately, it's not enough for Black people to be just as well behaved and just as good as everyone else to return to parity. I think that they have to go above and beyond. And you could argue that that's an unfair burden to place on them. And I get that. But there's a reason why there's a mechanic of human perception that you're going to be fighting against that is a lot more powerful than any policy that you can instantiate. And every other minority I can think of that's been persecuted in the United States has had to do exactly what I described.
No one's been persecuted like black people in the United States. No one's had chattel slavery. No one's had their children be the property of other people. Like it's but the main point I want to make is like you're drawing the line in a weird place. Like you're saying like they're treated differently by the police because of their past behavior or sometimes unfairly because of the past behavior of other people. But none of that matters as far as I see it because you're still drawing the line in a weird place. That past behavior was a response to aggression. That aggression has been the norm for centuries. Black people have been treated like shit, like property. Worse than shit, almost. So like they've been tortured, enslaved, kept in chains, and their children have been made the property of other human beings for centuries. Not all black people have dealt with that, but that's colored how white people see black people in America for centuries and essentially forever. So like I'm saying that if you're looking at like black people not behaving themselves in front of the police, you're looking at it from the wrong angle. The question is like why would any black person want to or be able to behave themselves in front of someone who represents an institution that has literally oppressed them and their community for hundreds of years? How should it be expected for someone to act fully rational in an encounter with someone who represents murdering them? And guess what? It doesn't matter how they act. How was Breonna Taylor acting? She was sleeping.
With her drug wait, what? Yeah, with her drug dealer boyfriend.
So? That's not a crime.
No,
That's not
that's not
a
a crime in and of itself, but it's a bad life decision to be associating with a drug dealer.
we don't kill people for bad life decisions.
No, we don't.
So we have a broken system. And if you want to say, like, well, they would have done that to a white family, happens a lot less. And if you want to say, well, black people act different in front of police, that's why they're targeted more, that is a huge assumption that you should try to look for evidence for. Because I'll make my own counter assumption. I think police value black life less. I think naturally a police officer, most people in our society value black life less, including a lot of black people. You know that famous study where black kids were given dolls and white kids were given dolls, and one was a black doll, one was a white doll, and they saw which one they liked more. Like, these biases exist for all people because our society has valued, yeah, I mean, it's not a very complicated argument. Our society has valued black life as a property rather than as a human. And I think that carries on, and I think they're treated as less than human. And I think that's why they're more likely to be shot by a police officer.
So if everything that you're saying is true, then there ought to be some sort of large-scale systemic change in order to right these wrongs. Can you point to specifically what Germany has done since the 40s in order to right these wrongs for Jewish people? Because the Jewish people in Germany are doing quite all right. And I could argue that the atrocities done to them by the German government are far worse than slavery.
That's a really good question. Can I use this as another intermission? My last one. I just got to pee really quick. And I can think about that good question.
You have a crib sheet on the toilet, don't you?
Yeah, I was like, in case he asked about the Jews. No, one sec. I'll be right back. Well, we're getting some comments.
Yeah, I was just chatting.
Make him explain what evidence it would take to make him not believe in systemic racism. What evidence would it, that's a great question. What evidence would it take for me to not believe in systemic racism? You would have to prove to me that what you're saying is true. You would have to prove to me that that anything you're saying is true. When in reality, I think these are a lot of assumptions. You would have to prove that it actually is a nuclear family problem, or like black people are behaving worse. You would have to look at these studies. You'd have to read the books and talk to the experts who say like, no, black people are actually targeted worse than white people. And you'd have to argue with them. So I would have to listen to someone make the point that actually black people are not targeted worse from the police. I would have to see that actually all these encounters where it seems like black people were treated unfairly, that there was a good explanation for them. Or that they didn't fit a pattern of the same thing. You would have to show, oh, those are different. Here's what was happening there. Here's what was happening there. But that's so often not the case. And when people look at thousands of studies of literally police encounters, look, I did do some prep for this and like looked at sources and stuff. And like black people are like apparently targeted by the police more. They're pulled over more. Why would they be pulled over more? Like, who was the guy? I forget his name already. The one who was killed just last week. He was pulled over by the officer for having a Christmas.
Dante Wright.
Yeah, Dante Wright. For having a Christmas tree thing, he was pulled over. That's the kind of thing where a police officer can say, "Do I want to pull them over or not?" For that, I
could say that that's a problem regardless of race. I don't see that as a racial issue.
Right. It's a subjective police thing, and then the police use that power to enforce their racial biases. The cop who had killed him had like 6 or 7, or had like, a number of like violent or use of force encounters basically in his first 7 or like years of on the force. So he had this history of using force, and because we don't have any oversight for the police, like someone like that, because of a systemic lack of oversight, we have people's racial biases come out in these fucking stupid ways because they're allowed to make that decision in the moment. Do I want to target this? Do I want to pull them over? Yeah, look at that black dude. I'm going to pull him over. Rather than like, oh, that's a white woman. Like, nah, she's fine. It's just a Christmas tree. You think that doesn't happen thousands more times? Like in the country for thousands more different crimes? The same judgment. And weed. Look, man, I was smoking weed outside. People would, right next to cops, like, you think I can't do that easier than a black person? Like, I can in most places. Like,
do you have evidence for these arguments that you're proposing? So you're saying that police will pull people over for small infractions like an ornament more often if they're black versus white. I guess we're just ignoring all the other races.
I think it's stupid to ignore them, but black people do have a unique place of oppression. Hold on, please. I feel stupid because I prepared some resources but couldn't figure out how to bring them into Steam. One sec here. Or Streamlabs. I mean, are you looking at the stream or because I might have?
Yeah.
Okay. One sec. I had a few resources pulled up. And okay, inside 100 million police traffic stops, new evidence of racial bias. Stanford researchers found that black and Latino drivers were stopped more often than white drivers based on less evidence of wrongdoing. So that's an NBC News article. That's obviously just a headline. Do you want me to send you the link? You can type in the headline or something. Inside 100 million police traffic stops, new evidence of racial bias. So, yes, if John's Locke, if you wanted to, the psychiatrist said to always ask, what does the author want to be true before reading a study? Yeah, sure, man. But then also read the study, okay? Then also read the study and use your critical thinking to say like, well, they studied this and I haven't studied it. So look at 100 million traffic stops and you see racial bias. So if you want me to not believe in systemic racism, you need to provide a better explanation for that statistical evidence.
Yeah, Occam's razor is a really shitty argument, though.
I'm not using Occam's. Give me a better explanation for a phenomenon is a pretty fair thing to say.
I think I've been doing that the entire time.
So did you look at that article? 100 million traffic stops and they see evidence of racial bias. What do you think?
I didn't do it yet, no.
So just if you can grant that this NBC News article is based on a real study that used real good methodology, like what other explanation could it be for the discrepancies?
I don't think that you sent it to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, yeah, my bad.
I'm curious, the first thing I'm going to be looking for is if it's controlled for geographic area.
Sure. Yeah, look for all the controls. Obviously, make sure it's a good study. Don't.
I think that the most
I sent it in Discord.
Powerful point. I see it now.
Yep.
The most powerful point that John's Locke has made in the last couple of comments. All of these racial arguments need to be decoupled from socioeconomic status. And I agree, because we look at this with a racial lens, but I don't think that that's the most accurate way to do it.
So maybe you shouldn't say that black families have a problem then. Maybe you should talk about the poverty. Maybe you should talk about like other things rather than the race of the family.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when you control for socioeconomic status, you still find that single motherhood rates are significantly higher among black people.
Cool. I just wouldn't explain that by trying to make any assumptions about the race of people.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
If there are more single mothers who are black, that's a fact. The question of how do you want to explain that fact is up to you.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain it with as many personal anecdotes that I think are reliable as possible. I consider myself a curious individual, and when I meet people that have different life experiences, I try to extract as much from them as possible to glean what they know about the world and add it into what I know. And anyone who knows me well can attest that I do this like it's a religion. I'm to a fault. I'm annoying about it. If I find someone who knows something about the world that I don't, I try to learn it. I've met and know people who, for example, are educators within inner cities or educators in suburbs. And I ask them about their own subjective experience about something that they know quite well, quite intimately. Someone who knows individuals, not just statistics, because statistics are important. But like the commenter in the chat has been saying, you can manipulate statistics to tell a particular narrative. That doesn't mean that every study is inaccurate, but it means that one can carefully craft and ignore certain conflating factors in order to spin a specific narrative. So the whole point of what I was trying to say is, from the anecdotal evidence that I've gleaned, and take it with a grain of salt because it is anecdotal, the values of education and, dare I say, articulation are actually punished within certain areas of the Black community, to the point where someone trying to study more, trying to study harder, trying to better themselves will be ridiculed for doing so by other members of their community.
Even if that was true, why would that be? Do you think it's like how deep do you think this thing is? You think Black people are like different from white people? They don't like deep
No,
down.
I don't.
You
I
think they
don't.
deep down don't care about education or articulation? Why do you think this would be?
I think that the racial differences that exist between races is very limited in terms of behavioral. So clearly there are physical differences. That's what race is.
Sure.
But I don't think that those are behaviorally meaningful. So like, I don't think that white people are more predisposed to be violent than Native American people, or Eastern Europeans are more. But clearly there are differences like height, for example, or melanin production. Right. So what else could account for those differences? Is that what you're asking?
What? Not even what else. What? You haven't said what does.
I mean, rap music certainly doesn't help.
Rap music you want to blame for. Rap music is something that comes out of Black people's lived experience. It doesn't shape. It would be silly to say it's the cause, rather than you want to point to people's culture and their art and say it's influencing them rather than it's coming out of their lived experience.
Yes, because there are a few progenitors of a specific culture. The culture is driven by a few and propagated out to the masses in certain communities.
So you want to ignore articles that share studies of hundreds of millions of people. You want to ignore evidence of like many thousands and millions of people experiencing disproportionate abuse from their community and from their government. And you want to say it's their culture that influences them. So what should Black people do? Listen to more like classical music, and then they like it's so ridiculous to draw the beginning point at art and rap music, when so much of rap music, which is extremely good, I hope you like some rap music at least, because there's some really good stuff, but it comes out of like lived experiences of poverty for the most part. I mean, that's what rap is often about, coming out of poverty and making it for yourself. But like,
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Rap music largely glorifies drugs, murdering, and cavalier sex.
No, man, this is like, but even if that was true, you're talking about a specific kind of rap music. But even if we just talk about that kind of rap music, like, why do they make that music? Like, why is that the life that they're living in and growing up in? Like,
I'm not sure what you're saying. You're saying it's effect. I'm saying it's cause.
Yeah, I'm not even just saying it's purely effect. I just don't think it's purely cause. Like, yeah, of course, rap music affects people's decisions. Like all art, like affects people's decisions. But like, you want to point to that rather than poverty and what to me seems like generational oppression. Like, fine, you want to argue against systemic racism, fine, but like against generational oppression, I don't know how you argue against that. Against Black people growing up with harder circumstances because of the history of this country. Like, so like people grow up in more poverty, make music where, yeah, they glorify the fucking like fucked up parts about life or whatever. Cause like, I don't know, man, cause it sells also. You know, there's like a lot of white people making money off of this music. Like, it's like, I don't know, man. It's weird to say that is the reason why like your friends might think like Black families don't focus enough on reading. Also, are these white friends like going into black communities and teaching and having their assumptions about black people? Like, I mean, I just think we should listen to more black people rather than, we're two white people like sitting here talking about black culture and stuff. Like, I don't know shit about that. Like,
I don't think that the color of someone's skin determines the quality of their argument.
No, I think your lived experience and your body of direct knowledge, you're saying things that you don't know. Like, you're saying things from someone else's experience about their, like, do they know about these families? Like, do they know that do people know that it's like, have you ever found evidence that says that it's rap music rather than, for example, poverty that affects like single motherhood or something like that? Like, have you ever found evidence of that, or does it just make sense?
I mean, if you look, okay, so single motherhood, I'll glom onto that since we're talking about it. If you control for socioeconomic status, it isn't close. Why?
Wait, sorry. If you control for, so you're saying
if you
more.
look at poor white people and poor black people,
Yeah.
it isn't close in terms of how many single black mothers there are versus single white mothers of the same socioeconomic status.
Sure, I believe that.
That's
Like,
interesting.
sure, but it's interesting, but it's not like, oh, well, that must be because of like black men not caring about family. Like, there's no reason to go to that conclusion.
So what's the next best explanation?
I think sometimes you just have to say there are a lot of factors and look at them one by one. Like,
that's how I feel about a lot of the assertions you're making with respect to systemic racism, policing, sentences. It seems as though you're willing to jump to the most logical conclusion in your mind for some things that suit the narrative that you already want to believe, but not for others.
I don't know if I see that. When have I done that?
I think you're doing it right now. I mean, you refuse to look to what I think are the most obvious causes. Maybe you just see it differently than I do for single black motherhood, for example.
Why don't you ask single black mothers what they think? I mean, like, they would know better than us. Like, why? Like, it's just ridiculous for two white men to be sitting here, like, talk about single black mothers. Like,
do me a favor, identify as one real quick, and then we can get back to it. I'm sorry.
No, it's a really bad joke, man. You shouldn't make those jokes. Like, it's
Why?
not funny. Like, it's not funny, man. Because, like, it's making fun of, like, something that is extremely real. Like, people not being able to identify how they want is, like, a huge, like, actual problem. It's like a real form of oppression. Like, people can't identify how they want. Like, people can't be gay.
I do not agree that that is a form of oppression, no.
So you grow up in a family where you can't say you're gay without being disowned, and that's not oppression? Like...
Oh, okay. Oppression by the government.
Yeah, I don't care. I mean, look, you asked me a good question before I went to the bathroom, and I forgot to answer it. I don't think that it's reasonable to compare the situation of Black Americans to Jews in Germany. I understand that there are some parallels. I don't think you can compare them. I mean, anti-Semitism has been a huge problem for a long time in Europe for centuries, but it's not the same as the history of slavery. It's a different kind of oppression. And
explain how.
Well, Jews were still considered, like, able to own property and stuff. Like,
not in the late 1930s, they weren't.
Okay, but, like, for, like, a small period of time, right? Like, but before and after they were.
Yeah, and, like, a small period of time right before half of all of them got killed.
Sure, like, it's just a different form of oppression. It's not the same. It's not a genocide. Like, it's...
So tell me if I'm jumping to a conclusion here. I'm sorry if I am, but are you somehow asserting that the subjugation of Jews living in Germany up to and including the Holocaust is less than that of Black people living in America up until today?
Not at all. I'm literally just saying they're different, and it doesn't make sense to talk about them as the same type of oppression.
It totally does. I mean, you're making the argument that America has done such a disservice to Black people over its history that we are still feeling the echoes of slavery and oppression. Is that about right?
Yes, but I'm not saying we've done such a disservice in terms of quantity. These are different qualities of oppression. They're different types. So I think like we've done an enormous amount of a certain type of oppression to black people as a country.
Which
And
kind? Which kind specifically that hasn't existed in Germany?
I just think chattel slavery is different from genocide. They're just different forms of oppression and they have different meanings.
One's way worse.
I don't think, I mean, like, I don't know why it's even worth saying better or worse. Like, I don't know why that is something that you go to. Like, it doesn't, to me, seem meaningful to say better or worse. Like, I mean, is it worse? Like, do you want to count the number of people who lived in chattel slavery? Would it be less? Like, I don't know.
I don't think number of people is really.
So how do you say
what-
worse? And what's the point? Why say worse or better? The point is they're different. I stick with what's
The point that I'm making is why aren't we seeing that same type of systemic racism that you're saying exists in America? Where is that in Germany for Jewish people who live there right now? What did they do so well to abdicate everyone of the systemic racism that must have existed?
I think anti-Semitism is probably still a problem, but not in the same way that racism is. And I don't. First of all, I think the German government didn't they do like a fair bit of like reparations. Not that that makes the world a difference, but I do think they did a fair bit of reparations, right? Is
So
that
giving money back is what would change it?
okay? So you're implying it's something about the difference between Jews and black people, which is ridiculous.
I think the difference is the culture and values of those two people, not
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. There's no, and it's just as stupid as genetics.
are some. I don't think so, because people can choose culture, right? People can't choose genetics.
You can choose your culture
Sure.
that you're born into? Not really. I mean, at a certain point, you can maybe make some choice, but you born into your culture. Look, I think it's a very good question why the situation of Jews in Germany is different from black people in America. I think that's a fantastic question. I don't think it makes sense to think you know the answer to that without like looking into it. If you've looked into it and come to the conclusion that this is true,
I don't know the answer, but I think it's interesting enough, and I think that it should make you pause before claiming that systemic racism is the reason that black people are not earning as much money as white people or Asian people or Indian people.
I'm not
Or
saying
Hispanic
that.
people.
Like, I'm not trying to say like systemic racism is the reason that I just think systemic racism is a useful, like, descriptive phrase to apply to the broad range of ways that black people have been held down by systems like redlining. Are you familiar with redlining?
Redlining is an example of systemic racism. Very clearly is an example of systemic racism.
So you believe that systemic racism is a real thing?
In the past,
Redlining still exists.
no, it doesn't. Show me
Yes,
where.
Redlining is still a big problem. Here, I'll send you a link.
If you can show me evidence of redlining, I will point to that and say that yes, that's an example of racism and discrimination.
Yeah.
Because it's indefensible, morally bankrupt, and yes,
Yeah.
that would be a great example of the man, so to speak, putting the boot on the throat.
Yeah. All right. I just sent it to you in Discord. And I'm sure there's other sources. It says redlining's legacy, maps are gone, problem hasn't disappeared. I'm going to get more water. 1 second.
What do you guys think? Am I am I a racist for thinking what I think? Are some cultures actually better or worse than others? I think those that put a huge stressor on familial values and on culture being important can be better than others. And maybe you don't have to agree with me on why, but the empirical evidence is in, and certain cultures do a lot better in the United States than others. And I don't think that that's due to policies like redlining. Why are Indian people earning twice as much as white people? I don't think that's because white people are being discriminated against. I think Indian people have a culture that leads to that.
Is it a good article or? I'm glad we can agree that redlining is systemic oppression.
This article does not say what you thought it did. This article say that redlining has amounted to X amount of dollars, like $212,000 lost for Black people, and that still has echoes today. So because it hurt them financially in the past, they still feel that today. But it very clearly says that it is illegal as of the 1977 Community Reinvestment Act.
So basically they're showing that communities that had redlining are still suffering.
That would not be an example of systemic racism that you provided.
So you're saying, but are they saying that places that had redlining are still suffering because of that?
Say that again, sorry.
Are they saying that places that had redlining are still suffering because of that?
They're saying that Black people were robbed of wealth they otherwise may have been able to generate.
All right, here's one other source really quick. So this source that I just sent you says persistent economic equality. There's significantly greater economic inequality in cities where more of the areas were, sorry, there's like terminology again, HOLC, homeowners loan corporations. So I guess they're the ones issuing loans, and that can be redlining. So there's significantly greater economic inequality in cities where more of the homeowners loan place graded high risk or hazardous areas are currently minority neighborhoods. So that's redlining. So there's significantly greater economic inequality in places where they had redlining.
I have a question for you. I'm just going to ask it at risk of you calling me a white supremacist, which wouldn't really make sense. Is it possible that there are genetic differences that do account for discrepancies in performance?
I don't know. Sure. I mean, genes are a very interesting thing. I don't claim to know everything about them, but I've just never seen anyone make that argument who was able to fully understand like the social and like historical aspects of oppression. I've never heard anyone look at the situation like that second source I sent you, they're showing that like places where redlining was done, people. So the way you phrased it was how that Black people weren't able to accrue wealth, and that's still affecting them today. The point is redlining in the past still affecting people today?
That's not what you said. You said redlining still
Fair enough.
exists today.
I could be wrong about that. I don't know if I am, and I'd like to do more research about it, but even if I'm wrong about that, if redlining in the past has persistent effects today, which I believe both those articles said it does, right? That the specific neighborhoods are still poorer today because they were redlined.
Which would make sense.
So isn't that what you agreed being systemic racism still having effects today?
I think you gotta, I'm not arguing that there aren't. I hope that's not what you think you're arguing against, because that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to say that transgressions against certain demographics in the United States don't have lasting effects. Of course they do.
So you're saying systemic racism was a thing in the past, and
undoubtedly. Look at Jim Crow, dude. Of course.
And its oppression has effects that continue today.
Yeah. But I don't think that is the main driver. I don't even think it's a plurality for why there continues to be inequality, and there will be going forward.
So you understand redlining and the fact that people weren't able to accrue wealth
for that and other reasons, like when they were slaves and stuff. And you look at all that and you say, well, that doesn't have as much of an impact as like rap music on people's current situation.
I actually think that rap music is a pretty weak argument. I think that it has some merit, but I don't think that these are tough things to measure, right? It would be nice to see a comprehensive study of like redlining's here, rap music is here, like single motherhood, etc. Doesn't quite work like that. That would be really nice to have, but we don't have like a multivariate analysis. Rap music is just something that I pointed to on the fly that I think does have a detrimental effect on Black people in the United States. But
Man,
I don't. What?
I don't know how you can say that. Like, what effect does white people's music have on them? Like, how do you know that rap music has like a negative effect on people? How do you know that? And how can you make such a claim without knowing it?
Have you listened to rap music?
I've listened to a lot of rap music, and like
Me too.
So a lot of it might be about the stuff you're saying, but not all of it, man. There's an enormous amount of rap music that has
No, but
nothing.
the most popular rap music today, especially targeting ages 13 to 25, I would say, is not rap music about. It's not Will Smith talking about whoop-de-doo or whatever the hell
Yeah,
his
but like,
rap music was.
yeah, Will Smith's music fucking sucked. But dude, if
It
you've
did-
ever
it did
listened,
fucking suck.
if you've ever listened to like Kendrick Lamar or like, I mean,
Kendrick Lamar is an excellent rapper, and that is not who I'm talking about.
okay, well, he's probably one of the most famous rappers. And like, yeah, you're talking about like Lil this and Lil that and stuff. And like,
The
yeah,
X's and the numbers.
yeah, dude, they kind of fucking suck. But that's like that's like one specific type of rap music, man. Would you grant that an enormous amount of rap music has enormous positive effects on people? Like you need to.
No.
Yeah, dude, you're totally off base, man. Like so much rap music, there's no reason to look at rap and say that affects people negatively. Like you can intuitively say, well, it's all about guns and shit like that. You're making the violent video games argument.
Not quite. I mean, I see the parallel, but no, I don't think so. The rap I'm talking about, and this isn't a niche thing. This is a largely publicly consumed item that we could justify with number of YouTube views or something like that. It's lifestyle rapping. People talk about getting money and killing other people and sleeping with a lot of women. Sexual promiscuity, murder, and drugs are not values that are going to help anyone get anywhere. And I think that people begin to blur the distinction between art and life advice. And I think that distinction is clearer in video games, which is why I don't think that it's a great analogy.
Yeah, I get
Why don't we
that.
talk about like the song WAP, for example?
Sure.
Do you know it?
Yeah.
Problem?
No, dude. Why is that a problem? Who cares?
A lot of people, clearly. I mean, it's a very popular song.
No, but why would it ever affect anyone negatively?
Glorifying sexual promiscuity for women is not a good thing.
Says who?
The nuclear family would like to have a word with you.
I don't think the nuclear family is in charge. I think women can glorify their sexuality all they want, and if that messes with the nuclear family, then maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe we shouldn't limit how people express their sexuality if
but that's fine. People can do that. But then you can't discredit the fact that single motherhood rates are higher and are a predictor of financial success of their child. It's okay for us to evolve into this post-nuclear family world. Postmodernist, I guess, is the term that I would use.
Okay.
People can do that. They have liberty. If that's what they want, that's okay. But it isn't free. It comes at a cost.
But it's a really thin thread from WAP to that. I mean, or from from any of this music, like you think women being sexually liberated, like is this is that a fair way to put it? Like, I mean, you call it promiscuity. I totally reject that. I find that a very old-fashioned and Christian way to look at it. Like, I see it as sexual liberation. I don't think there's anything.
Wow, sexual liberation?
What does promiscuous mean? Your promiscuous is a very value-loaded word. You're comparing it against what? What does it mean?
I think that mom and dad traditional parenting is the most effective to date.
That's very heteronormative, first of all, but like
it is heteronormative. That's correct.
There's no evidence for gay
exclusionary. That isn't gay exclusionary. I'm not saying that gay or trans people can't be excellent parents. I know some that are excellent parents. It has nothing to do with it. But there are hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution that would like to have a word with you if you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I just don't. Yeah, I get that, but like, well, yeah. First of all, there's no evidence for gay couples raising kids to any worse than straight couples.
I think they actually probably do a better job because it's planned, because it has to be. And so it's two people that really want a kid rather than a mother and a father that a lot of them are accidents. So I think that if all else equal, if you have two parents that really want to raise a kid, I think you'd rather have a mom and a dad because they provide different values to the kid that people of the same sex can't. But I'm not saying that two people couldn't, shouldn't, or can't be good.
Yeah. I mean, I reject all that. I think that's a huge assumption, but I understand. But like, it's a difference. Like,
are women more nurturing than men?
I don't know. That's like such a loaded question. Like, that's like
I think that's an easy one to answer.
Are women socialized to be more nurturing than men?
Maybe not. I don't think it really matters. I think that women are more nurturing than men because they are women and have different biological makeups and proportions of hormones. Are men more aggressive than women? How about more violent?
Are men socialized to be more aggressive than women? Yeah.
No.
It's being aggressive as a boy is like rewarded. Like when you're a little boy growing up. I mean, not in all cases. Okay, whatever. Yes, we can argue over like how much of it is biological and how much of it is social, and that's pretty much what we come down to in like every single situation. But like, what were we talking about before? Oh yeah, like rap music and stuff. Like, oh yeah, the promiscuity and liberation thing. Like, so what are you suggesting? That an artist like Megan Thee Stallion writes a song like that?
I don't know who that is.
Okay, no, I think that's the person who made WAP. Like,
no, it's Nicki Minaj.
Oh, my bad. I don't listen. I still haven't even listened to WAP or Body or these other.
At the very least, yes. Yeah. Sorry. Let me finish your statement.
Like, what are you saying? Like, so fine, you have a problem with it. So what should be done about it?
Families should. Well, can you accept that it has an effect on individuals?
Like many people probably listen to WAP and go, "Cool, I want to go have sex and be like, I want to be horny all the time, or I want to like do some sex stuff that maybe you would call promiscuous." Like that's totally possible that it has some impact like that. But what are you saying should be done about that? Should people not be allowed to publish like sexual music?
Oh,
so what should be done?
Is it fair for me to make some sort of moral judgment on various artistic forms that I think are worse than others? I mean, the original point I made that you had a huge contention with was that some cultures are better than others.
Yeah, that's absurd.
It isn't absurd. What about a culture that puts like a premium on taking care of the elderly versus one that says, when you're old, too fucking bad.
You know what? Look at, for instance, like a tribe in the Amazon. I remember reading some book about some group in the Amazon. Yeah, they didn't care about their old people. They let them die. And they developed like a spiritualism about it. You develop some rationalism. Oh, old people, blah, blah, blah. They're supposed to die. You come up with some belief system. it basically serves your function because you're a nomadic group or you're, constantly in motion or something. People develop the social and cultural aspects in tandem with their material needs and circumstances. So if I look at a culture that doesn't care about old people, I mean, it's messed up if they're able to. But if they're not able to take care of their old people, I'm like, yeah, I get it, I'm not going to judge.
I'm going to go pee. Can you noodle on what societal need WAP is fulfilling?
Okay.
I'll be right back.
So, yeah, I mean, just to answer your question, like, is it meeting a need? Yeah, it's meeting the need for Black women to say that their sexuality is, like, something that should be celebrated. That's what it's meeting. Like, women in general, but Black women in particular, yeah. Meeting the need. Yeah.
I said certified freak 7 days a week, wet ass pussy, make that pull-out game weak. Yeah, you fucking with some wet ass pussy.
You're doing the Ben Shapiro thing.
Spit in my mouth, look in my eyes, this pussy is wet, come take a dive, tie me up like I'm surprised.
Stop, you're gonna ruin it. You're gonna ruin it.
I'm so confused. Which aspect of that is sexually liberating?
Dude, come on. You cannot make the Ben Shapiro argument. Like, look.
I can't?
No,
I just
because
did.
You don't read the lyrics of a song and go like, what is this? What is this saying? It's not like a text. It's a piece of art. So why is that sexually liberating? Because of what I just said. It's celebrating a woman's sexuality. Women's sexuality, dude, men didn't think women could orgasm until relatively recently in history. Like, women being sexual was considered like a bad thing, like a condition.
Now make it green if you want to see some wet ass pussy. Like, that ideal is you need to shower me in money in exchange for sex. Tell me which part of that I'm reading too much into, please.
Like,
this is a hill I'm willing to die on.
There are a lot of songs that represent values that I don't agree with or like, and maybe I don't, like, I wouldn't want my friend to be like, or like my girlfriend to be like, shower me with money or else I'm fucking leaving you, and like your dick game is weak and like I'm not hanging out with you. Like, I don't like that, but in its as lyrics in a piece of art that is a pop song, like what it does, you don't just look at what it says, but what it does is it gives people the song to rock out to and feel hot and sexy.
Do you feel the same way about Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines?
I don't even know who that is.
Ah, darn, okay.
It sounds really familiar, though. You can tell me.
It was a song that got blowback for being kind of rapey. It was like he keeps saying, I know you want it. I know you want it. You're a good girl. No.
No, I don't know it, but maybe that's why I've heard about it. Like,
so you say you can't stay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that song came under partially legitimate criticism that, like, it was kind of rapey. Like, the dude's trying to pressure her into staying so they can have sex.
Yeah, man. I think
we're going to be willing to scrutinize that as a culture. Isn't it also fair to be scrutinizing WAP?
Yes. And I think that the difference is the people scrutinizing WAP, like you, are a smaller group and are looked on as less reasonable than people criticizing that. And you can take an issue with that, fine. But that's the case. People will laugh harder at you for criticizing WAP than they will for talking about whatever that song's called. But like, you have every right to take issue with it. And like, to say it's bad values. I would say the values aren't as bad. I would say a song that says, like, shower me with money and I'll be yours, or whatever the lyrics are, like, that's not as bad, in my opinion, as a song that's, like weird about consent or something like that. But like, that's not even the point. You have every right to take issue with the song. But if you want to draw something of like, oh, it's encouraging women to be more sexual and that's harming the nuclear family, you are building in an enormous amount of values that not everybody has. And it's not fair to, or I shouldn't say it's not fair. It's not reasonable to look at society and say, why is it not conforming to my values? Why do women want to be more sexual than I want them to be.
I don't feel the need to shape society with my own value system. I recognize why that feels repugnant to you, and I get it. That's not what I'm trying to convince you of. I'm trying to convince you that these things have an impact on someone's life outcome. And this is a pretty damn plausible explanation for why there is still a disparity. The value systems that people purport to their children and teach matter for your life outcome. You're free to do it. This is America. If you want to put a premium on that, that's perfectly fine. But some value systems don't produce the same results as others. A value system that puts an enormous premium on education, like is done in Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Taiwanese, Indian cultures, has a profound impact on income.
I don't know, man. You have no evidence for black people not valuing education. Your evidence was an anecdote from a friend who taught in a black school.
Oh.
I think you're used to like circles where that's like granted.
I think you don't know me well enough to say that.
Well, I'm just saying that because you're not giving any evidence for it.
Yeah, I know. I understand that. I know why you'd be quick to write that off as I'm getting that from my own echo chamber.
No, I'm just like you're saying that to me as if I would grant it, but I don't grant that. Like black people, first of all, the history of black people in America is not the same as the history of other races in America. It's extremely and entirely different, especially if you look at a lot of Asian races, or I don't know, a lot of races in general. Like, people didn't come over here under the same context as black people, and the history of oppression is entirely different. And so, like, it doesn't make sense to compare black people to other cultures in America, let alone in other countries, where they're just like culture is very complicated. And it doesn't make sense to say like, oh, these people's culture is influencing them negatively without looking at, well, how much of their culture comes from the material circumstances of historical oppression in their environment? Like, how much of, like, yeah, I don't know. It's just silly to say, oh, well, here's the reason, because it's the culture that they're making that's affecting them, rather than like, oh, maybe there are other factors. I mean, do you ever talk to like black people, ask them why they think like, you know, single mothers are more?
Yeah, and I have someone I would really appreciate if you would watch a good amount of content by him. I know it's asking a lot, but there's an economist that I really respect. His name is Thomas Sowell. He's in his 80s, so he's
is
not
he
gonna
the
be
fucking
around.
bell curve guy?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay.
Anyway, he's
a
an
black
economist
guy.
I really respect, and he speaks about a lot of the issues that we've covered today, and I think makes a lot more cogent argument backed by statistics, because he is a researcher first, that I found quite compelling.
Okay.
And he has a vested interest in the black community, and as in addition to his own personal anecdotes, but he can quote easily accessible public statistics better than I can.
Yeah.
And speaks to an interesting reversal where black people were doing a lot better in the 60s and 70s. And then there was a reversal, a downturn that he speaks to.
Because of all the civil rights or something? Or?
No. Okay. Don't jump to that kind of conclusion. Absolutely not.
So why was there a reversal?
He blames mostly social programs and the way that single motherhood was dealt with, but does so in a very cogent way, right? This isn't, I wouldn't point you to someone that goes like, this is big Democrat media screwing you guys over. It's what I think is a quite coherent and compelling argument. And I'd like for you to listen to it and tell me what you think.
I'm not sure that I'm going to do that. Like, I completely am not okay with these arguments. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to point to black culture, and I don't want to listen to anyone who's not willing to talk about the history of oppression continuing today. And we looked at redlining, right? And I gave you 2 articles that showed the economic effects of redlining persists in those communities. And you have no way of addressing that. So you can talk about, like, what did you say about that? Like, how do you think that affects people?
Other than the fact that I disproved an incorrect assumption you had that redlining still exists today.
But that's not the
Isn't it
point.
possible that if you were wrong about that, there's something else within here that you could be wrong about that you're making an assumption about?
And
I
I
mean,
granted that immediately. But when we look back at the articles, they were saying the economic effect. So if we're able to agree that like people have a more difficult economic situation because of systemic racism from their parents' generation, you know, like why would we ever want to talk about culture before we've even settled how this affects people? Why are we shifting to
because they both matter.
but you have no way of addressing this stuff. What like how do you think this
Laws.
affects single motherhood?
I mean, well, this being what?
People not being able to accrue wealth because of
Yeah,
systemic.
make sure the laws are fair today. That's how you should address it.
So that's
If you can find a law that is systemically racist, change it. I will support you in doing so.
but you're okay with increasing policing because you think it's not great but a helpful thing ultimately to get to where we need to go to jumpstart the you were talking about earlier. So I'm saying like we need to jumpstart equality, not just
How? Tell me how.
affirmative action in a bunch of different ways.
Affirmative action is a colossal failure in
Yeah,
a
I
bunch
mean,
of different ways.
I don't think
Not to
most
mention
things.
it's racist and is basing it on someone's skin color rather than their socioeconomic status is ass backwards.
Fine, we could do it by socioeconomic status. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't just affirmative action in the sense of like doing things affirmatively to make things to push things along towards equality. Writing the laws does not make things equal. I'm sure you would agree. I mean, it's not like things magically become equal, as those articles show. Economic effects persist from redlining. So what do? Making the laws. Look. Let's look at weed for instance. Weed's been illegal for a long time, disproportionately affecting people of color. That's a fact that I can send you links on. But like, more black people are affected by weed laws, even though they smoke weed at the same rates as white people. So when weed laws are changed, as they have been, and it's legalized, it's kind of fucked up in a sense because like the people who are still arrested sometimes are not expunged those charges. Sometimes
let them
they're
out of prison. I think that's wrong.
yeah, so like that's the same principle that I'm saying. Like you sometimes have to do more than correct the law itself. You have to then like go beyond that. You don't want to just change the law. You have to make it better for the people still affected by the bad laws. And so if people are still affected by bad laws, not just weed laws, but redlining and a million other things that people know a lot more about than me, we need to do more things affirmatively.
Can you tell me something specific that you think should be done affirmatively that is fair
Oh,
and supported by the Constitution?
I mean, like, well, yeah, I mean, like, there's in every case where people have been disproportionately affected, there should be something done. So, like, I think I really don't think it's fair to like expect me to like be able to solve these problems. Like I'm basically wondering if you agree on the problems and then it feels like we can talk about what feels like a good solution for itself. But if you're asking me what my solution is to like black people being worse off, I mean, basically investing in black communities in a million different ways. Giving black people money, not just throwing them cash, but investing in black communities. And yeah, making it easier for them to get a good education and like making it easier for them to get good food.
This is something Thomas Sowell talks about actually, about how to improve education for black people.
Cool.
He feels very strongly about it, but that's unfortunate that you won't spend the time to take a listen to what he has to say.
I mean,
I think you're unfairly castigating me into a subset that you think that you've approximated all of their arguments and have put into something that you won't agree with.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be doing that. I'm trying to respond to what you're saying.
I think you had said that you aren't interested in discussing this with anyone that assigns cultural or other sort of explanations for why these problems exist. I
Okay, I don't.
apologize if I'm misremembering that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe I said that. I mean, it's very frustrating to me to like to hear this and like not know sort of how I could possibly address it. Like your views are very like well developed and like I when I say like talk to a black person and stuff, like I don't just mean like find one black economist who agrees with you. Like obviously there are black people who agree with you. Bill Cosby was one of them. He would always be like talking about black culture being like bad and stuff like that. And he's obviously a very, a very important
He was a
moral.
positive icon for a very long time.
Yeah, and he remains a very moral figure in many people. Yeah, no, he raped women. He was a rapist.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah. So like I mean like look at the consensus of what black people think would improve their situation. I don't want to be sitting here and telling you what would be good for black people. It's like ridiculous. Like I'm not that person. I don't know. But like anybody who's ever sort of looked into it with what I would consider a neutral mind says, yeah, they've been unfairly affected. We need to do things to make things better. So what does he say? Invest in their communities. Like that's, I guess.
He's a big fan of charter schools. He thinks the public school system has failed.
Okay, and I just think maybe we should, instead of doing that, maybe we should just like actually invest in the public school system, like pay the teachers more, like
I am all for paying teachers more. I think teachers should make about 3x of what they make.
Yeah, where does that money come from?
Take it out of Social Security.
You think that would help society?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
What do you do for the old people who need Social Security?
Let them keep their money when they're young and invest it how they please.
So you would change the past. Like you're not talking. I mean, if you're talking about a policy, you just have to deal with things as they are. Like if you're gonna do something now, like how do you make it so it actually improves? Like if you right now want to invest in schools, so you're gonna cut Social Security for the future and so on, and make it so that people pay less taxes now, and that's gonna ultimately help the people. I don't know, man. There's a lot of speculation here. I don't.
Yeah, public policy is not a simple topic, especially when you have a fixed amount of money. That's why it's easy to just print another $4 trillion and just use it however you want.
I would just be very skeptical. I mean, it really does activate me with people talking about like some group of people's culture, especially when you're not part of the group. Like, I don't know what gives you the right to say these things. Like, I hope you're listening to not just one black person, but like majority black people when you're having these opinions formed about black culture. Not just like Candace Owens, like black people who have the consensus of black people around them agreeing like, yes, this is the reason we're in our situation. Because the color of your skin doesn't determine your arguments, but your lived experience and like how much that resonates with other people matters. So like how much
your lived experience doesn't make an argument any more or less correct either. It just means that your argument has been filtered through the lens of your own personal experience.
Yeah,
Whether something is good public policy or not has absolutely nothing to do with the lived experience of the person purporting it.
Yeah, no, I know. I just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I feel like I don't know what to say exactly. Like, yeah, I think it's very silly for two white people to be sitting here talking about black culture. It's extremely silly and weird.
I see you jump to the painting of lines with skin color and race. I see it as I care about my fellow countrymen, and I don't care that we have different skin color. I would like there to be a better outcome for all people, and I want to be able to do that in a fair way that doesn't violate the rights and liberties of other Americans. That seems like a reasonable thing for me to care about.
The thing is, you and I do not know enough to know how to care about black communities in America. They know how to care about that more. from more direct knowledge of Black communities.
They know more what it feels like to be a Black American than
No,
I
they
do.
more they
But
have
saying that they know the prescription better than someone else is not an assertion that you have evidence for.
there's empirical knowledge that you and I don't have from experience. And like, I'm not saying that people's anecdotal experiences like are all that matters or something, but you and I are ignorant because of our position. Like, because we're white people and have lived as white people, we do not have certain pieces of knowledge that other people have. So I'm not saying we don't deserve to have a say about this, or, you know, it's great for you to care about other people and how to improve their lives, but it feels wrong for us to think we know better than the communities who actually have experienced oppression for generations. And when you listen to them, you would support Martin Luther King, right? Like, in most of what he stood for, like you thought he was
everything except beating women. Yeah.
So he was a huge fan of affirmative action.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Okay. So you don't support it when he says it, or you do support it when he says it?
No, I mean, I think I understand where he was coming from. I think generally people don't think of affirmative action when they think of Martin Luther King Jr., though.
That's because his legacy has been completely tainted by white people.
Interesting.
Like,
so what do you think his legacy should be?
He was murdered. I mean, as a I don't know, as like a look, he was murdered while he was planning the Poor People's March, like, which was a march to obviously unify people of all races who are poor. He was murdered by the FBI. Like, the FBI helped fund. There's clear. I can send you articles. There's clear.
I'm aware that the FBI had him as a person of interest, were following him, and potentially may have been implicated in something very nefarious, potentially his death.
Yeah.
I haven't seen definitive proof that
Sure.
they were responsible for his murder.
Okay.
But I am aware of the FBI's involvement with him. It's
Okay, yeah.
very sketchy at the least.
Yeah. So yeah. But like, so yeah, I think his legacy is caring about vulnerable groups of all kinds, not just Black people. But yeah, and I think he was a huge threat to America, and that's why he was murdered.
Do you care the same way about Black people that live abroad, or is it simply in America that you feel this injustice needs to be corrected?
I don't care about people's skin color. I care about people being oppressed and being in vulnerable positions.
Worldwide, or just in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I can't claim I spend all my time. I'll read, news articles about what's going on in like Myanmar or something, but like I can't spend all my time where people are literally oppressed everywhere. So, like,
way less so in the United States than most of the rest of the world.
I guess a lot of that, and I didn't make this point earlier when you mentioned Ethiopia. The history of colonialism has a huge role to play in why other countries are so fucked up. So it seems wrong to look at other countries and go, well, at least we have it better off than them. It's like, yeah, we fucked them up. I could give you more information. There's like unequal exchange. There's companies, Western companies, like taking an enormous amount of profit from other countries and like basically pillaging them. But like, anyways,
untouched by colonialism would be a commune mecca of prosperity and kindness.
No, I just think colonialism had extremely negative effects on people's lives. And that doesn't mean the lack of it would have been a utopia, but it was harmful, and people are still living with the consequences,
I think there's definitely a lot of merit to that argument that colonialism took what it needed from certain areas, ravaged them of natural resources, and then left.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to check something. What were we saying before the colonialism thing? Sorry, I lost the thread.
I think you were upset with me trying to understand the lived experience or prescribe solutions for cultural and racial differences in the United States because my skin has less melanin than someone else's.
No, and I'll just be straightforward. Like, I guess I don't get the vibe that you've genuinely tried to understand from Black people their situation. Like,
you have incredible mind reading powers I didn't know about.
I'm just saying, I get the sense that you didn't that you don't.
That's an incredible premonition that you think you have, I guess.
I'm
That's what I'm
not
saying. Like, unless you were in my lived experience, how could you know?
okay. I'm not trying to say that I know that you haven't. I'm just saying like the that's why I'm reacting this way, because it doesn't seem to me, and I'm not saying I'm reading your mind. I'm not making a claim that you don't do this, that you don't care about their experience or listen to them. I'm just saying like it doesn't seem to me that you do, because I hear so many black people like all around the country saying like we are unfairly targeted and like we are still suffering because of historical oppression. So like you don't seem to be informed by those people's experiences.
I don't think that they're necessarily correct. I think that they've been convinced of a victim complex that is both hurting themselves and not based in reality.
Okay, but you're not supporting that with any evidence.
No, I'm not, but I did send you a reference to something that I think can.
Okay, like, yeah. So I
I've
guess you
extended
think
you some latitude with the various claims that you've made. I'd appreciate it if you do the same. That I've arrived at what I believe is a good faith conclusion about a variety of the different opinions that I hold, not based on trying to fit a narrative that I already believed, but trying to find fact-based arguments and form my own opinion.
I hear you, man. Yeah. I never hear the points you're making out of anyone's mouth who I think is fair-minded, ever. I've never heard anyone blame black.
I think I sent you one.
Okay.
I think Thomas Sowell, a very compelling argument, fair-minded.
I saw he was like the Milton Friedman School of Economics or something. It's like it's already like how fair-minded could you be if you're in the Milton Friedman School of Economics? Like that's like an extreme bias. That's like the free market bias. He's like the founder of free market economics.
It's like saying that BLM doesn't have any leg to stand on because the founders are Marxist. That's preposterous.
I don't think you need to listen to BLM to understand the points I'm making.
But the point that I just made, which is that you're casting an aspersion at someone's ideology because of an association with a various school of economics, is preposterous. That's very close.
I agree. I'm not trying to say that I'm not going to read his. I'm sorry that I said I'm not going to read his stuff. I'm fine checking out his stuff. But the point still stands that everyone else that I've ever heard, which are many people, make the points you're making, do not seem like they're actually listening to the counter arguments.
Then I feel lucky that I have the unique opportunity to potentially expand your mind out of that bubble for the first time.
You know, man, you tell me that you're arriving at your conclusions reasonably, but you're not treating me like I am. You're treating me like I just haven't found the one person who will prove what I'm saying wrong, rather than it's a little insulting. It's like, oh, once you read this, like you'll change your mind. But it's
I think you might.
Okay. So what do I say to that?
Okay, I'll check it out. We'll talk next time about it.
Okay. I don't know what to say. It doesn't feel like a fair debate thing to say like, well, you'll change all your opinions once you read this thing.
I don't think you'll change all your opinions, but it's something that I found compelling that backs up a lot of the arguments that I've made that you didn't find compelling.
Okay.
I'm pointing to you to what I consider to be a credible expert source in a way that you've done multiple times throughout our conversation by searching for and linking me to articles.
Yeah, but it's just not the same because I don't have time to read this and respond to it in the moment. So it's like, I don't know. But look, you didn't convince me of any of this stuff about black culture or the family. I find it completely outrageous. It's not even like it's racist. It's like you're just not taking into account any of the counter arguments in any way that I find legitimate. It doesn't seem like you've really dealt with economic oppression and how that's affected black people. So why should I go to culture as something that affects them when you can't even respond about how economic oppression has continued today and continues to hold black people down? Like you need to deal with that variable before we start talking about how WAP affects like.
I don't have to deal with that because the data are in on many other subsets of races that have started with as little or less economic capital that black people have had, and they have catapulted their prospects far beyond that of black Americans.
Dude, if you think that's proof for the difference between races, man, you're just
No. It's proof that there is something else going on other than just black people didn't start with enough capital.
there is a lot else going on, but your brain
agree.
should not zoom in on culture. Your brain should not zoom in on the family. That's
Should
not,
it zoom in?
it should zoom in on their community, their school system, like how they are basically like how do you expect people to pull themselves out of economic oppression, man? Like if redlining, which literally was like not even a generation ago, like if that is still having effects on people's communities, and that's one thing, man, that I could get you to agree to. But like if
You didn't get me to agree on it. I already believed that redlining was an issue.
I'm sorry, it's one thing that I could get us on the same page about. Like if you could if economic oppression is still affecting people, like you should probably zoom in on how that works and why that how that affects their situation before you zoom in on the family, man. Like because the family is affected by economic oppression. Bad rap music is affected by economic oppression.
It's interesting. I see the two as cyclical. I don't see them as a very clear cause and effect. I definitely see them as cyclical and intertwined. I don't necessarily say, I think you're more likely to say, look at the past economic oppression. That explains all of the other disparities that you see today.
No.
And I am more of the belief, yes, there was economic oppression in the past that has some lasting effect today, but there are a host of other factors that account for the continued disparity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say that all or nothing or anything. I think it's wrong to focus on culture and art when you're talking about culture and art that comes out of a history of oppression. It's absolutely wrong to talk about that culture and art as the cause in any way, shape, or form.
Is there a systemic oppression in your mind that accounts for the tremendous amounts of black on black crime occurring in inner cities?
Totally, man.
You explain,
And even what?
you explain how you think those two relate?
Dude, people write books on this. What am I supposed to say? Like, you can economic oppression, people growing up in poor environments, like does that lead you said it leads to crime earlier. You said that poverty leads to crime. So that's what I think. Yes.
Absolutely it does, yeah.
So we're talking about that. That's how poverty leads to crime. Like do you want me to go into all the mechanisms? I don't want to speculate about how exactly it works. People study this shit. But if we can agree that poverty leads to crime, yeah, black on black crime, it's just a weird way to put it. Like it's crime in their community for a wide variety of reasons.
It isn't a weird way to put it. Earlier you were talking about white police officers killing black people. So it's an interesting contrast to be talking about black people killing other black people in comparison to white people killing black people. It's worth noting.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I guess, yeah, sure. But like, yeah, why is there more crime? Because people have been suffering for worse reasons for longer.
Do you know if, just to the police officer comment, you had said that white police officers are disproportionately killing black people. Do you know if that holds true for black police officers killing black people? Does that rate drop? Or
I don't
black
know.
people
It's a good
also?
question.
I think there's a lot of those good questions that I wish we had focused more on.
That does
talking
not
about
disprove
these
systemic
issues.
racism. I would assume that black police officers kill black people at a higher rate than they kill white people as well.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's a catch-all for all of the differences in the way that we think about these things, but I think that there's a lot more that we could have talked about in terms of casting doubt on what I believe is a completely encompassing assumption that you've made, that continued systemic racism is responsible for the disparity between the races in the United States.
Man, we really should have started by defining what we were talking about as systemic racism.
For sure. I almost stopped you and asked you, and I forgot to.
Yeah, because you keep saying that I'm saying it accounts for all of this or that, and like I'm saying systemic racism is a good description for other phenomenons, not that I'm blaming systemic racism for situations. Like I think it's a word that describes other phenomenons, but doesn't doesn't describe all of the reasons for people's experience. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I was man. I don't know. I'm like, I feel bad. I feel like I didn't get to really present like all the like the positions I'm doing. I feel like I didn't do them justice.
I'm here to listen, man. I'm not trying to shut down any arguments that you're making or come off as though I have made up my mind on this topic and I'm not willing to hear a new argument. I'm sitting here and willing to listen. And if you want to talk for 15 minutes straight and explain to me why you've arrived at the opinions that you have, I'm willing to listen. And if I think you've made a compelling argument, I will change my mind.
No, I get that. I get that. Yeah, I'm just not the best person to be listening to about this, man. Like you should read like works by like Angela Davis and Michelle Alexander and stuff. If you read Angela Davis's writing, like she's like the one who will maybe explain it a million times better than me. So I just feel bad because I'm not the person who knows all about this, and I can only like kind of point out flaws in your arguments and maybe make some general references to statistics and stuff. But
The communist?
is she a communist?
Yeah, she's a communist.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean that introduces its own problems.
The police have essentially been protecting people's money for their entire existence, and that includes the way they dealt with slaves, because slaves were considered property. The police seems to serve the function of protecting capital, so that's why you see a lot of anti-capitalism with anti-police. But
Interesting.
yeah, we can talk more about that another.
I get what you're saying there. I think it would have helped if we were to quickly analyze what we could have done better.
Sure.
It seemed like, well, I think we could have more clearly defined exactly what we were trying to get to the bottom of.
Yeah.
Because I think we spent an inordinate amount of time. I think you tried to convince me that oppression has existed against Black people in America, which I have no contention with. What I'm interested in talking about is continued and future disparity and where it comes from.
Yeah,
I think that's an interesting discussion.
It felt like a more argumentative one today, but like it probably needed to happen. I feel like I hope we keep talking, but like about all this stuff. But I feel like it probably needed to happen. Maybe we just broke some ground. We really do have to figure out like what do each other believe, what does each other believe. But if I was gonna sum up my main point of all this stuff, I would say like I think you are having. I think you're coming to, if not conclusions, like tentative explanations or whatever. For you're explaining phenomenons in ways that I don't think take into account enough other stuff, enough other facts, and it seems like you're saying that I am trying to explain. I guess what do you? I don't know. Basically, this is about like how we explain phenomenon. So if we can agree on a phenomenon, then we can argue about the explanation. But if we don't even know if we don't even agree on the phenomenon, it's sort of maybe today is just even talking about can we agree on the phenomenon even if before we even get to an explanation. Because it's hard to argue both at the same time. I'm saying like, well, systemic racism is a real thing, and here's parts of where it comes from and so on. But
yeah, we never defined what that was, right? It's probably useful before trying to decide whether or not it exists, defining what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe in your mind it's a different thing than it is in mine.
Yeah, I know it has a lot of associations for a lot of people. I just think, yeah, it's a good descriptive phrase. I mean, I think racism is a really big problem, but I know that we may not agree on all the details of that, but like, yeah, I think it's hard to look at because it's so broad, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways that America negatively affects Black people, and I don't think like focusing on Black culture or like ways that Black people view their families. I think you're making a huge number of assumptions when you're talking about Black people and the way they view their families, and I don't think you realize all the assumptions you're making about ways people were or were not affected by their outside experience. Like, so I guess that's my main point.
Okay. I'd love to talk about this in more detail.
Sure.
Do you think we can do it without it getting emotionally charged? It felt like it did for a brief period of time there.
I don't know, man. It's pretty hard because, like, I don't know what to do when I say, like, Black people are killed disproportionately by police, and you say, no, they're not, and I send you an article, and, like, you're like, it doesn't seem like you can even agree that the article's legit or something because it's like from Harvard or something. So I just feel like the reason it gets emotional for me is because I'm just like having whatever tools at my disposal like taken away from me. I'm like,
I think that in order for us to talk about this, I think probably we should try to come back to it like 10 episodes from now after a certain level of trust is built that we are both arguing in good faith and are both pursuing truth. And the more sensitive the topic, the more quickly I think that we are going to be to assume that the other person is attempting to win an argument rather than find the answer.
And I'm not saying, I really don't think of you like you're doing that, man. I really think we just have different views of this stuff. I don't see you as, I honestly don't, hopefully I don't come off that way, but I don't see you as trying to just win an argument. Like, I really just, I need you to, you know, in good faith, be able to look at a Harvard study. And I don't know, man, like every institution has its problems, but like, what are you going to find that's better than like multiple studies? I don't know. It's just, we need to be able to agree on the facts if we're going to argue about explaining the facts, you know?
That's true.
But
that's true.
Yeah. Like, I don't know that there are more Black single mothers. I'm just assuming you're right about that because, you know.
There are.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
Even when you control for socioeconomic class, but.
Yeah, I believe it, man. I just think, you know, when you hear a phenomenon like that, it's like, oh, that's probably complicated. Let me look into all of the reasons for that, you know? And if you're going to do that, you have to look at, whatever. Okay, we should probably stop. We've gone really
I know you have to go. I don't want to hold you, so okay,
no,
let's cut it.
We can go another minute or two. I was just saying,
I'd love to. I wonder if we look at statistics the same way. There were definitely areas where it seemed like you snuck premises in, where you conflated correlation with causality. So you found correlation in statistics, and I was casting doubt on the causation of those statistics, not on the correlation.
I don't really ever feel like I'm talking about causality necessarily. I don't try to because I try to be pretty precise. But yeah, I mean, if I see 3 times more Black people are being killed by police, I'm not saying causality there. I'm just saying, okay, cool. That's like something to know. How do we explain that?
You were saying that's racist though, and that is assigning causality.
No, I'm saying if I'm going to try to explain that, one of the first things to come to mind is, yes, dehumanizing Black men through racism.
Which is an explanation.
I agree, but I'm not saying that is definitely the reason. I'm saying that's a candidate reason that we need to take into account.
I'm okay with that assertion, and what I'd be interested in is like you come up with what you think would be a plausible explanation. I come up with a few plausible explanations.
Well, you did, and you said it was like the behavior of Black people, and like I don't think that's. I don't think. I guess neither of ours are supported by evidence because we're both not providing evidence. But I certainly feel more confident making my claim, but I guess that's just me.
I think our own lived experience and news sources are definitely going to have an impact on that.
Definitely.
So it would be nice to try to tease that out and find some sort of common ground.
We'll have to be looking at studies. I mean, that's the only thing. Like, yeah. But anyways, I hope to do it again soon. Yeah, I'm down whenever you want.
We can talk about guns, so next time.
Nice. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, we'll have more time to study.
All right, buddy.